I think that worked. Let me just go ahead and double check. Yeah, we're good. All right, sup, boys? Whew. Yeah, overall, I played all right. Definitely could have done better. I played about the same as I did last week. Just got a lot worse RNG. But it doesn't matter, because, like, regardless of doing well last week or doing poorly this week, the RNG doesn't matter. The only thing you take away is, like, you look back and you're like, okay, what could I have done better? What could I have done, what could I have done different? Okay. Ooh. After screaming, you decided not to bring Star Spring? Yeah, Star Spring is really trolly right now. It's literally trolling to not bring Lee, straight up. Like, especially if you can play Lee well. Like, even the games where we lost as Lee, we could have won those games. Especially, like, that last one against Frostbite, if I knew, like, the objectives of the matchup. It is actively throwing to not bring Lee right now, straight up. Lee is probably better on tournaments than ladder. Well, I say better. It's a better kind of tournament deck. Like, the reason I might not recommend Lee for ladder as much, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with recommending Lee for ladder. It's kind of a busted deck, but it's harder to play. It takes longer for the games, and it's like you have to waste more brain power, and a lot of people don't want that. Just to like squeeze out a couple like percentage win rate points, which like isn't worth it for everybody. But it's like it is absolutely actively throwing to not bring it in tournaments, and you can't counter it. Like, it's you can counter bad players playing Lee Sin. You can't counter good players playing Lee Sin. It's actually impossible. Literally, like it is a tier 0 deck. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna chill for the last few hours. That's kind of what I want to do. The sad situation is we're not going to be able to get to Masters before we leave. We're Diamond 3, and I literally only have 3 hours. It's like, if I had like 6 hours, I could maybe do it. But especially right now, like day 3 of the meta, this like everyone's good players, and I just can't win that many games. I can fucking try though. I can fucking try. It'd be nice to get to Masters before we had to leave. Maybe we can get lucky. You'd watch Kuvira's matches? Yeah, some of you guys want me to like watch the rest of the tournament games. I kind of want to just chill though. I kind of want to just chill for today. Whew. 15 hours later at D4? Yeah, it might be. This ladder is like that sometimes. Like, day 3 is pretty rough. Because day 3 is still like... I wonder what's our global rank across players right now? Because day 3 of the meta, with like basically everyone's climbing as like an X-Master, we might be ranked like... We're probably... I mean, we're at least top several hundred right now, right? Master rank. But it's just like, at the season reset, like everyone is just fucking D3. So this is Noise playing Tomcat and Soraka. I liked that lineup. Like, between Discard and Lee, I just enjoy these two decks. Yeah, I think we just go for super early proactive game plan. Like, Battlecaster is unanswerable enough here. So for those guys, for those of you who don't know it, and maybe I'll just kind of like turn it into a music stream soon, but just like, you know, since this is the last I'm seeing of you guys for a while. For those of you guys who don't know, like, here's the situation. I've been, you know, having a lot of like kind of problems focusing, a lot of like mental clarity for months. I've kind of talked about it very publicly, which is good because I mean, it was very uncomfortable for me. And basically, I think, you know, I've been looking into a lot of things, and it's a lot of different factors that are causing it. But I think something that would be really good for me right now is just kind of like a break from electronics, and just kind of like, you know, because there's a lot of like distractions, and it really has a negative impact on our brains, especially the way we were evolved. So, you know, what I'm doing right now is I'm taking kind of like a 5-day break from everything, completely unplugging from things. I'm gonna actually, you know, I'm gonna fly out to live for 5 days with my father, because we used to live together back in North Carolina on top of a mountain. It's actually like a really nice area, very like in nature, right? There's like hiking and stuff like that. I kind of miss it. It's a cool area. I guess I can just play Draven here, make his attack feel a bit worse. And that's kind of my plan. So this is my last stream right now. It's Thursday evening. And I will be back it's Friday evening right now. The plan is I'm going to be back on Thursday next week. So it's not too long. It's like 5 days. And you guys are used to it because I take a lot of breaks. For me, it's a very different kind of break, though. Like, for me, it's not just like chilling and relaxing and gaming. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. A very much needed change of pace. And I'm looking forward to it. We have kind of a absolutely ridiculous hand here. Just making sure we're playing around everything we might need to. Very dumb hand. Very stupid. You know what? Maybe I'll do some kind of video talking about how my break went after the fact. But apart from this announcement, I mean, this is probably going to be it for me. Like I said, I'm not going to be on devices. I will be using my phone to like take notes. I'm not going to have it set to communications. I'm not going to do any talking with people. There's going to be basically no digital communication, no like, Reddit or YouTube. What I might do is I might just upload random pictures to my Twitter. Just like no words, just if I'm like hiking or something like that. But definitely nothing more than that. I mean, it looks like we've got a pretty sweet attack here. We can make his position feel pretty awkward. He's taking a lot of damage. Pretty absurd amount of damage. Let me just go ahead and do this. He gets the block 2 things though. But yeah, I think that would kind of be the best thing for me. So I'm really looking forward to getting back into the tournament scene. I just mentioned right now on stream, like, I'm super hyped for this new tournament announcement that Riot put out for like the ladder systems for the tournaments. And as you guys know, I've been like publicly, a bit disappointed with the current metagame, but that doesn't mean I hate Runeterra. Like, I'm looking forward to balance patches. I'm looking forward to things changing a little bit, and I think it'll be a ton of fun playing in these tournaments. Yeah, there's nothing I really want to spinning axe here. We can just chill. I need to replenish my board by hitting like Chompers, Poro Cannon. We might transition into like a weird elusive win con kind of thing. He could actually still win this. That deck can do some scary things sometimes, for sure. It's actually probably best to just play the 1-mana 2/2 here. Especially if he's running the Broadback. Most people have started putting back in Broadback Protected just because of the state of ladder. There are a lot of people running like aggro versions, so Broadback to Protector, even though I wasn't running day one, I think it makes sense in the deck now. I definitely do have some improvements to make in the tournament scene. I think a lot of it just comes down to preparation. I think that's, it's important not to forget that. And yeah, I'm just going to grind it out. I'm going to like train a lot in specific matchups. What are we doing here? I don't want to let him like capture anything for value. Pressure's not too much on us. It's kind of interesting. I'm probably okay passing. It can't really be too vulnerable to a pass back here. Like, he literally has to heal here. This looks fine. Bit of an issue here is, stuff like Pale Cascade, which he will likely have, but I think we might have to just get outside of land units anyway. Like, my win condition might just be a bunch of fucking Poros. So we might just have to do this. Like, Tom's health has to matter, limiting what he can eat. And Pale Cascade, I don't think is going to be game breaking here. Just kills our Draven, which has a hard time mattering after exactly this point. Whew. And now that he's kind of like tapped under the ability to use Acquired Taste, which is the benefit of forcing the Pale Cascade here, now we can play our Poros set up for potentially an open attack that will deal a lot of unblockable damage. We do have, we do have also Flame Chompers. I mean, he only has 3 blockers anyway. So I could see a world where we try to do something something adorable with Chompers, but I don't think it'll matter with this many blockers. And yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. Did I forget anything with the update? Because yeah, back Thursday, I hope. Don't commit me to that, but should be Thursday. Tournament super hype. I think we lost this game. Like, if he has a Broadback to Protector in hand, it's definitely automatically over already. And I don't think we can actually... We can't really threaten this too hard. Like, we can try to, like, damage the Tahm Kench more. Try to assassinate the her. It's not doing damage, though. I guess we're just doing this. Because he's taking more damage on everything except for Flame Chompers. So Chompers wants to drag the one that I'm damaging the least. So there's only like a break, no retiring. And I know for a fact, a lot of people, because people read into this kind of stuff, like because of the timing of the break, people are going to be like, Swim hates the new patch. Swim's fucking, he's quitting Runeterra. Honestly, okay, it's kind of funny. Yeah, it is true. I actually do kind of hate the new patch, but I would still be playing if I wasn't on this break. And this was something I've been planning for a while. It's been scheduled in. So it is just a coincidence that it does happen to be happening on a week with a meta that I'm not a super big fan of. But honestly, hey, I don't even mind that it worked out like that. So feels pretty bad. I wonder what kind of hands we can even reasonably beat here. Kind of none. We're kind of beating like no hands here actually. I mean, we can devalue Hush hands by going in for like one Spinning Axe on one Poro right now. Just to potentially deal 1 damage. Whereas like... Yeah, he's still gonna Hush for +2, but it is kind of like the lower value I can give to Hush before it starts mattering. Alright, looking pretty grim here, boys. Not looking great. He needs to have a bad hand. A very, very bad hand. Who cares, dude? Just look out for your health. I think it'll be a lot better. I need to kind of like, you know, get my stuff together. It's honestly been a long time coming. It really has. I've been living like pretty unhealthy. And it's only like recently it started impacting like my life and kind of like my mental state. And there's a lot of things going on at once as well. You know, I've been talking with a lot of doctors and they're trying to figure out like if there might be... It's very common that like a lot of the times when negative happens, it can kind of all collapse at the same time. And that's kind of what's happening to me. It's very possible there's like additional conditions going on. You know, I'm having a lot of things checked, like for any sort of like psychological disorders or some things like, for example, like thyroid issues. I'm definitely like just not feeling great. And there's a lot of things that could be causing that. But either way, like, no matter what ends up going on with that, I mean, at the end of the day, it just comes down to, yeah, just making sure I'm, like, kind of living more optimally, you know? I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun this, like, next 5 days.
You leave me no choice. Live with purpose. Take heart.
He might not have a great way to deal with the Poros, which is kind of interesting. I mean, he kind of has to eat one with Tahm Kench, basically.
What's the worst that could happen?
This looks good. You should study, learn stuff. It helps with depression. Yeah, no, that's actually one of the things. You know, I've got actually a great counselor. He's a neuropsychologist. We were actually talking earlier today. And yeah, that's one of the things he recommended. It's weird to think about. The brain is such a strange thing, huh? It works in very weird ways. But yeah, absolutely. That could definitely help. So we can't really get excited face, unfortunately. And he did play the Protector, so this might be it for us, boys. So he hits a Poro, which means if he has Guiding Touch, my Get Excited doesn't work here. I mean, Get Exciteding Tahm Kench isn't even really that good anyway. It does slow down his win condition, but that has a hard time mattering. We do need to keep the Jinx alive. You know what? It's kind of crazy. I think my best bet is to Get Excited the Tahm Kench here and hope he can't stop it. If he has Pale Cascade, it doesn't save it because the Poro will kill it. I mean, the noise would have to be a monkey to not play around Get Excited here, I think. Or a desperate hand. But the problem is, like, if I Get Excited face, if the Tahm Kench stays, I'm not sure if I can really live. because my Jinx won't be able to do anything, and he should have the kind of hand that will have an answer to that. I'll try to go for the get excited on Tahm Kench and hope the noise is being a monkey here. But we are not looking great, boys. Okay, and that's it. That's kind of where we're at right now, right? On everything. So I'm gonna enjoy this next few hours of stream. I just kind of wanted to, at least talk a little bit, update things, make sure that you guys are in the loop. And yeah, I'm actually feeling super positive right now. Like, it's so great to have a plan. I'm feeling really, really good, Got a lot of things planned. Got a lot of things planned. I do hope Runeterra is able to kind of like get its meta together, because like, man, I love so many things about the game. I love that they're doing this new tournament system. Fingers crossed that ends up being great. But yeah, like the meta, like the way they kind of like handle meta design as a concept, I'm definitely not a fan of in a lot of different ways. It's like the fact that we just had a new expansion and like basically everything is just getting super and it's not just this one expansion. It's not just like, it's been a recurring problem for a while. This is kind of like the sort of, what's that big boy word, apotheosis. This is sort of like the worst it's been, but it's, yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a recurring issue in Runeterra. The way they approach like meta design. A lot of people are very, a lot of people are taking breaks right now because of, Lee Sin and aggro. It feels like the gap between tier 1 and tier 2 decks, the gap in terms of their performance is pretty high right now. Pretty high. It's like, it's really hard. You're at the end of the day, you're always going to have a best deck, and you're always going to have these kinds of like, I don't like playing super tier 1 decks usually because I'm kind of a snowflake, and I don't know what it is about that I just can't, get out of. But yeah, it's definitely right now, it's the hardest it's been to try to like do cooler, interesting stuff. So hopefully there's some changes there. We'll have to see. And I'll talk more with Riot about, potentially working with them a little bit closer on the changes. Because I talk with the developers, like the developers talk to a lot of community members. And on occasion we'll suggest things, and it's a big source of feedback. And I'll engage in some discussions about like how things should be, or like how the design is. And they're usually quite interested in talking. I think like I definitely I think I'll be able to try to work with them a little bit closer. Like maybe I can give them some better or more valuable feedback, like before, like kind of more preemptive stuff. Whereas I've been kind of like very reactive in my feedback. I actually haven't really talked with them that much in the past like 3 or 4 months, just because I've been, the last 3 or 4 months has been kind of weird. I've been kind of like more lazy and depressed and unmotivated on average. Not every day, but just on average in that block of time. So I've just kind of like fallen off that kind of thing. But I do, I do look forward to kind of like working more closely, and hopefully I can give them some input that might just like help the process, because it's all about. And it's not like I'm like an expert and I have all the answers or anything like that, but it's about kind of like having these discussions and kind of arriving at a conclusion together, because I can't say right now, I don't have like a single answer that would like fix the game. I have a lot of ideas, and I have a lot of, I do have a lot of, I would say like axioms of card design that I do think holds. And I do think it is kind of like an awkwardness with some of them with how it works, and just like engaging in those kinds of discussions, both people can end up with better conclusions than individually. I think like we can maybe try some kinds of streams, because Riot's actually been very receptive to this idea of like being on stream. We had Ruben on the podcast back when we were doing the Progress Day podcast. Apparently, we're not doing that anymore. That just got canceled. Feels bad. But yeah, no, I mean, it'll be. I have so many things that are gonna make the game much more fun when I get back and I'm still optimistic about the next balance patch, but you know what? Who knows? Maybe that's just how I'm feeling today. Anyway, that's it for my update, guys. I'll see you guys. See you guys in 5 days. All right. Take care, boys. Okay, that wasn't for you. I'm actually not going anywhere. That was the YouTube edit. That was the cut on YouTube. That was the cut. You're good. My flight's in, I've got 2 more hours probably. I'll probably jam out and just kind of chill. Listen to some music. Have a nice, relaxing final couple of hours, boys. Make a new deck. That's a good meme. That's hot. That's sick. Maybe in like, so okay. Don't get me wrong. Because I gotta talk about this. It does come down to, different people have different bars, right? Like, some people are pure meta slave, no deck builder, and some people are like mega snowflake, hyper meme, not even like they'll queue up with a game where they're happy if they win they're happy if they win 1 in 20 games, right? Different people just have different bars for what it means to make something work, right? Like, I'm not a super meta slave. I do like trying to build and innovate new stuff, but I do have a pretty high bar for like what I'll consider like if it works, right? Like, I want something to feel like it is either like confirmed tier 2 or like tier 1 potential. Tier 1 potential can mean a lot of things. It might be a shit deck, but maybe it's a shit deck that there's so many ways to build it that you can't rule out that if you play it well and build it well, that it could be tier 1, right? And that's like, on like Tom Soraka is an example of that. Like, I don't think it's going to be tier 1, but I will still call it a tier 1 potential deck. I will still call it that. I feel like you're like 60% Spike and 40% Johnny. Yeah, maybe that's true. I would describe myself as more Johnny than Spike, but honestly, from an objective standpoint, you might be right. It really just depends like on the comparison, And like I said, then you've got, I think, Mogwai and Grappler, who are like more memeier. They have a lower bar, I think. Who's got a lower bar between Mogwai and Grappler? Is it Grappler? And I'm not saying that as like a high horse thing, like, oh, I have higher standards. Nothing like that. In fact, I kind of wish I didn't. But it's just different people have different, like, I do like building and I do like innovating, but I do need it to be something that could work. That maybe, even low odds, but maybe I could try it in a tournament. Not even likely, but there's a chance, there's in a weird lineup in a weird universe. But if I can't even imagine that, then I just don't like playing the deck, and that is most decks right now. It's most decks, most metas, but it's like every deck except for just a couple right now. Like, the only new deck that has a chance, in my opinion, truly is Tom Soraka. People are trying out weird like Tom Lux decks or Tom Freljord decks or Soraka Freljord decks, and like, I don't think they're terrible, but it seems pretty unlikely that they're gonna have, that chance. Mogwai actually gets pretty tryhard sometimes. Yeah, that's true. I haven't actually watched that much of Mogwai recently. Most streamers don't end up with like a ton of time to watch other streamers. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So like, don't get me wrong, I do like building new stuff, and I don't like being like a pure meta slave, but honestly, it's nice to mix it up. I am just trying to focus on like piloting and playing in tournaments. And in some metas, there's gonna be some times where it is like you just can't really innovate very much, and that's okay, because it's a good meta then, or at least this is how I see it. It's a good meta then to kind of like grind down on decks that, because like the thing is, the way tournaments work is here's how they work. They really reward being a versatile player. Because the thing is, if you're a one trick, the meta is going to be shifting week to week. Like, if I was an expert on discard aggro, like a real expert on discard aggro, I could abandon the deck for like 3 months, come back to it in a completely different expansion, just because I want to play discard aggro in the lineup that week and do well, right? Like, you do need to be a very versatile player. You need to know all the different matchups, and all the different like play patterns of different matchups to be a good tournament player, because you can't just commit to bringing the same thing every week. So like here's Zedley. Here we're keeping vision. House Spider's a good draw. So yeah, that's gonna be kind of like where I'm at. Instead of trying to like do crazy innovations, I'm still gonna have my versions of decks, and I'm still gonna, you know, there's still gonna be people like, oh, I like One for Honor. Oh, you can add some edgy things into decks. You know, you can, but I don't think we can really build new archetypes right now. That's kind of like, I guess, where I'd draw the line. I like, honestly, I guess Zonai Urchin turn 1 is going to be a little bit better here. We don't need to get excited this early. Great draw here. Nuts draw. I feel like it's more difficult than normal to climb in Plat. So that's true right now because it's always hard to climb in the first few days of a patch. But if you mean on day 3 compared to other patches or other expansions, you're probably experiencing, again, the kind of like the gap between power levels of high tier decks and low tier decks right now. Like you're probably like, I assume you're kind of like a tier 2 deck player, which there's nothing wrong with. A lot of people like playing, you know, their decks, and it's just like you're getting bashed by aggro or bashed by Lee Sin. And Lee Sin and aggro are, you know, gatekeeping the meta really hard right now. Right, so that's not great. I mean, we do kind of want to like have the Battlecaster Poro Cannon next turn. We're not really going to have as much vision potential. We could have saved the Zonai Urchin for later just to have like the vision on the Poros on turn 3. That could have been necessary. But I don't know if I want to commit for like air units yet. I might actually just like stay on the land for now. I'll do this. There's a couple of different ways to approach this. Like you could go for Battlecaster. The only problem is like there's a chance we actually might want to Poro Cannon Vision, in which case, you know, we don't necessarily want to commit it that early. We want to leave our options a bit more flexible, right? So it's here we've got Draven's Biggest Fan and Battlecaster. Could have also gone for a Fan, and that allows us to play Draven here into the Vision. The only problem is that's like it's off curve. Like as tempting as that would have been, we couldn't have done it because we didn't have another 1-drop. Because we can't send our unit mana away into spell mana with this deck. We have to use all of our mana as proactively as humanly possible. So yeah, I think we're probably just gonna full attack with Poro Cannon Vision. The nice thing about Poro Cannon Vision is it's very, very hidden. So what's gonna happen here is like I'll do an attack. He'll probably block in a way that might like keep Goat alive. Eye of the Dragon will block like the 2/1, and then maybe we can just kill the Eye for free or something like that. If he has like a trick or anything to do here. Oh, okay, so I'm just doing this anyway. That's fine. But yeah, Poro Cannon Vision is sneaky. It's really, really hard to like play around it just because the odds of those 2 specific cards are pretty low. Okay, so the Eye dies anyway. And yeah, that's kind of like super brutal. The Eye, for him, the Eye can't really die here.
And here's where I'd paint my constellation.
Okay. Why isn't Riot doing any more podcasts? Honestly, maybe I won't do a music stream and we'll just kind of talk. I just feel, I feel kind of social right now. I feel like kind of talking with you guys, talking about where I'm at, talking about, yeah, more about this update, my experiences, and how I'm feeling about the meta, game design stuff. I think it's, yes, it'll be a good time for this. Maybe we'll just do that. That'll be fun. We can, I think, get through a lot of stuff. Here, 1 second. One moment, please. So he's got Lee Sin here. That's slightly awkward, but it's not really going to hurt us that much. We've got a pretty nice hand for dealing with this. And we can kind of develop into him no sweat, I think. So we can just play this out. Do need to play our cards, though. Ooh, he could challenge my Draven. I mean, we kind of can't let that happen. It's kind of interesting that he's passing here. What is that pass? I mean, I really can't play anything else. Like, we have enough mana to play this hand anyway. So that's a pretty great draw. It means we can go for like the full elusive game plan potentially. We'll see. Could also just go for Draven Battlecaster. I think Battlecaster first is probably the most non-committal option. Yeah, we can. We're not yet at the point of elusives. We can just like swarm the board first and then go into elusives later. And yeah, there's the problem with Zed. Not really doing a ton here. So the question is like, does he just have the freest block against Draven ever? Probably. He'll still lose health and he'll still be vulnerable to my elusives next turn. This is fine. Like, we probably can't actually kill him this turn, but we can make it very, very uncomfortable for him. And yeah, Zed is not good in Lee Sin in the meta right now. So what's happening in the meta right now is basically, and you see this a lot in metas, especially in card game metas. Right now, aggro and Lee Sin together are teaming up to basically make things feel bad. I call it like the kind of like the gatekeepers effect, when like there's two decks that because of they form effectively what we can consider sort of like an unhealthy symbiosis in this case, because the two decks feed off of each other. Because any deck that tries to counter Lee Sin will lose to aggro. Period. There's no way around that. And any deck trying to counter aggro will lose to Lee Sin. Period. There's no way around either of those, right? Like, that just will happen. That just will happen. Ooh, he's still at 5 health. He might be fine here. Rummage is a great draw. Allows us to actually get some value out of this hand. Rummage first, see what we get. If Zed is not good, it's better to replace him with Diana. I like the Diana version right now in the current meta. At the end of the day, like, things are so meta dependent, things are so fickle, and a lot of people disagree, but right now in this meta, Zed is pretty trash. Diana version's good. You can run the mono Lee Sin version, and you know what? I don't really like the idea of the Soraka in this deck, but I know some people are still trying it, so I can't rule that one out either. It seems kind of unlikely that Soraka is gonna, I don't know. I haven't played it enough to say it's bad. Zed, I can say is bad right now in this meta. That I'm pretty comfortable on. Yeah. I mean, does it really matter that much if we block that or not? Interesting. So yeah, I mean, we can kind of like open attack with this board. Really looking for just a tiny bit of push here. Doesn't have to be much, but like, man, you know, like a get excited, a vision would be really nice. Like, I'd love to see a vision on this board, because then we could just do, I guess, just one of these, right? Are we playing around Spirit's Refuge? He could be running Spirit's Refuge. Let's play around Spirit's Refuge. Why the fuck not? So now, I mean, it's actually kind of funny. Hush doesn't do anything here, so he needs to like Guiding Touch. And then if he has Hush after, we actually still have Perfect Lethal. But if he has a second Touch and Hush, then we're kind of screwed. So you'll see, oh, we actually, no, we have more than Perfect Lethal against Hush. But yeah, Touch and a second Touch and Hush actually beats us here. So like, you look at it, wasn't this crazy? Like, even, we had like the literal best case scenario possible. The literal best case scenario possible against Lee Sin. And we top decked the nut at the end. But we still actually almost lost. And he was running the bad version with Zed. Like, we killed the eyes so early, but if he had an answer to that last attack, we still would have lost. Which is so crazy, huh? It's so nuts. Does Fran have a chance in this deck? Not even close. Let me be right back. I'm gonna take a wee.
What do you think of Soraka with TF rather than Tom?
Oh, oh man, I feel great. So yeah, I heard the question there at the very end. What do I think about TF in the Soraka deck? I think that at the end of the day, Tahm Kench is better for sure, but that is more a meta call than it might seem. It's also surprisingly doable to run like 2 Tahm Kench, 1 TF, just because having the option for TF is nice, especially when they have to play around it. And Tahm Kench is, you know, obviously not great to double draw either. So, but right now in this meta, especially like, you know, you're going to be seeing stuff like mirrors. Tahm Kench is pretty good against that. TF, I mean, really, if you're seeing like discard aggro a lot, the thing is, it's so hard to talk about the meta because like, it is literally different metas on different ladders, right? It is literally different metas on different ladders. Different, like, the meta, like, one day discard might be more popular and then it, like, its play rate might get cut in half overnight, right? Like, especially right after an expansion, even though the expansion didn't change a ton, the meta's not really stable, right? So I can't say what's better than the other, but I can tell you what you want to be thinking about in terms of, like, how to counter it. I will say, like, if you're queuing into a lot of discard aggro specifically, then TF is probably better than Tahm Kench. I think in every other matchup that you're going to commonly be seeing right now, Tahm Kench is probably better for how that deck wants to play. So, but Tahm Kench is surprisingly great in that deck. It really is. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, let's play a little bit more. I'm gonna enjoy my last couple of hours with you guys before we go on this break. How do you feel about pirate aggro in this meta? Does it deserve a nerf? Whew. I think something in Bilge Nox does definitely need to get touched down a little bit. To be honest, it's kind of a cliche. It's something people talk about a lot. Because, you know, if you're any sort of armchair dev whatsoever, you'll have seen, you know, some game design videos, or you'll have heard people say that it's better to buff than to nerf, and you'll think in your head, that sounds like a kind of smart, generally possibly right thing, so I'll repeat that. It is sometimes true. I would say it's true in this case, actually. I do think, like, you know, they do need to nerf Bilge Nox, and they do need to nerf Lee Sin, but I think the bigger... I do think right now buffs would go a really, really long way with this current card pool. Glad I'm taking a break. Fuck you. I'm just kidding, man. Nocturne Elise. I feel great though. Sorry, I'm freezing up a little bit. I don't know if I'm not sure how I like doing matchups like this. It's kind of throwy to... Let's try doing this. So I like to kick really hard when I go for rig. House Spider's a weird one, because on one hand, House Spider gives you like a little bit of stability that certain hands just lack so much and need so much. But on the other, like, it kind of has a really big ceiling for value. Like, House Spider's never really going to be that insane. And especially when I have a jury rig, I've been experimenting with, like, taking these much more aggressive mulligans to try to see, you know, what we can do with jury rig. So we're going to need to biggest fan this turn. That's actually pretty bad. Like, attacking on odds means we have to biggest fan here. We're going to be kind of off curve. We have, like, no good exchange into this board. We especially can't block because we're trying to ramp up our crowd favorite, so we have to take it. No good. And then we can like Draven into crowd favorite on 4, like discarding jury rig on the same action, so that we get you know, max size crowd favorite. It's not bad, but you know, it's not the nut start this deck wants, and his like chump blockers can do a lot against this here.
Run along quickly.
Okay. One second. Sorry, I've got some ideas that I need to be writing down. So sorry about this. Okay. Yeah, don't really have much of an attack here. Sorry. How do I apologize? What's the apology emote? Tom Canch. There it is. Because when you think about it, it is fundamentally the most polite out of my emote options. It's like a gesture of politeness. Like, I'm very, you know, I appreciate you taking the, you know, I'm sorry for the, so it's just the only right answer, really. Yeah, there's the mushroom. Okay, so yeah, we just want the max size crowd favorite. We could develop into it. So we really have to plan out our next turn, right? We have to think like, do we want to open attack next turn? Or are we okay developing next turn? Because if we open attack next turn, what we need to do is we need to axe the jury rig now so we can play the max crowd favorite, and the next turn we have our open attack. Or if we're okay developing it into next turn, then we can actually just start playing Battlecasters, because then we can play the crowd favorite. We don't have to like do anything weird. We can play our crowd favorite next turn. So we have to be thinking like, okay, Nocturne Elise, what could he do that punishes our development? Well, he could play like a Skitter. He could just play Nocturne. I mean, giving everything like -1 for the round actually does kind of hurt us quite a bit. And its stat line could even trade into the crowd favorite pretty well. Let's just do this, you know? I think this is fine. I know it's kind of weird, because normally you really like playing Battlecasters here too. But I do just want to limit his options. You know, we don't really mind committing the axe. The axe is actually kind of doing nothing else here. And if he's attacking, then we're getting another axe anyway, off of most attacks. But the biggest thing is we just want to make sure we're like our crowd favorites as big as possible. The Battlecaster doesn't matter as much as you think it would, just because his entire board, like he's gonna be blocking us every step of the way, right? And now his attack is giving us really amazing exchanges. I'm pretty happy with the fact that he attacked in like that. Like, I mean, his deck doesn't even really have great ways of punishing a 2 HP crowd favorite, apart from basically saying that that's the last chance my crowd favorite will get to attack, which I don't even really mind. So I think I'm actually pretty alright just taking a block like this. And you know what? Now suddenly we have a pretty solid, you know, maybe even like double Battlecaster. We could redevelop into next turn with just the Battlecasters. Play for this like 4-unit board. That looks pretty solid. Let's just go ahead and do this. Like, at the end of the day, we're not really that afraid of his development here, right? Like, at worst, it's Nocturne, but because now, you know, he traded down the board, so now we have a reason to develop. That's the big difference of what just happened, right? Now that he's traded down the board, we actually now can develop a 6-wide board by playing it out here. And he would need, like, Wraithcaller, basically, to punish that. So he is running... Well, he's running the Sentry version of the deck. Wow, he's running Sentry. He's probably not even running Wraithcaller. Okay. So Wraithcaller punishes because in one action, it gives him 2 blockers to our 1 attacker. Skitterer, he shouldn't be running Skitterer. He could run Nocturne here. And it's not impossible he's running Wraithcaller. Okay, so that feels good. That feels good. Looks solid. Want to axe Draven's biggest fan so Elise doesn't attack? Because I want Elise to attack there. I love the fact that we just killed his Elise for free and my Draven survives. That's great. So this is my current discard version. It feels pretty good. We can talk a little bit about... Ooh, wait a second. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about this one of Teemo. A lot of people say it's trolly, because a lot of people look at Teemo as like a troll card. Teemo was actually ran in like the earlier versions of Discard Aggro that were most competitive at the start. The reasoning here is basically we actually don't really want to be running so many Dravens. Right now, so here's how this deck works. It's a swarm deck. So we're running a lot of like light cards, right? We need to swarm out the board and we need to reliably have a big board because we want to gain value out of cards like Vision and cards like Crowd Favorite, right? And Battlecaster. These are the three cards that are basically winning us when we have a wide board. So to do this, we need a lot of early drops. So Draven's biggest fan is Solid, just because like these regions don't have like super amazing early drops. Sometimes it's like, you know, it's basically a way to get the Draven into your hands reliably while still having an early play. And it's kind of weird, but you wouldn't really think about it. But drawing Draven's biggest fan is usually much better than drawing Draven. Like, you'd be surprised. Drawing Draven turn 1 can kind of suck. Drawing Draven turn 3, you know, you want to draw him turn... You don't want to draw him earlier than you need him. Actually, you really don't. So when I have biggest fan and I can control when I draw my Draven, make sure I'm maximizing my odds, it's a great card. I've always liked this card. It's been underrated for ages. So it's solid. But between 3 Draven's biggest fan and 2 Dravens, you know, it's pretty important to get a Draven in the hands, but, you know, at a certain point, the odds are going to have diminishing returns. We don't really need to, like... I think I calculated it. I remember... I can't remember exactly what percentage off the top of my head. I think it might be like 4 or 6 or something like that. But I mean, here, just for the sake, we can go ahead and, you know, calculate it. So we've got, so we're looking for turn 3.5 because you're either playing Draven on turn 3 or 4, depending on whether you're attacking evens or odds. We've got a 6 of Wanted. Usually this deck takes a 3-card mulligan into a, you know, turn, let's call it 3-card mulligan, assuming turn 3. So that would be the total of, what, 10? And when you calculate this out, you get 84. And I think when you go down to 5, it should be like 78, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's 78%. So you're increasing your odds by 6% with that final Draven. But again, that's for having it on turn 3. We don't even need it on turn 3. There's a lot of hands that don't necessarily need it. And the biggest problem with that is it kind of ends up breaking out a lot of other hands. Like Whirling Death can actually be cute sometimes, don't get me wrong. But there's a lot of hand states where what I just want instead is early proactive units, right? So Draven's biggest fan, I prefer running over Draven, or over more copies of Draven. We do want kind of like lighter units to play. Double drawing Draven is all right, but not amazing. You know, Teemo gives us basically one additional 1-drop, while, you know, helping us potentially like develop for the elusive condition. Teemo's a solid card. The biggest problem with Teemo is like drawing other copies of Teemo sucks because it turns it into this useless card, right? But because we're only running one Teemo, we don't have that downside. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's not a big fucking deal. Like, that's all I'll say about it. I can't definitively 100% prove that it's better than the 3rd Draven, but what I can say is, like, there's logic for it, and there's also counter arguments, don't get me wrong, but it's also just not a big deal. Like, it's just one card in a 40-card deck, which I think a lot of people don't really see. I think a lot of people don't understand card ratioing that well, actually. I see a lot of people that will just kind of, like, scoff at literally any 3 of they see. A lot of, like, surprisingly, you know, great players. Yeah, I mean, Chompers in this matchup is quite nice, just because it doesn't fold as hard to the AoE. But I think we just go for this. Maximize damage early. Try to find other options. Because Chompers is only good if we have... Like, we keep Zona and Joy Rig. Yeah, we find the other Chomper anyway. So, obviously this is more damage on turn 1 here. It should be. Do you mean non-3Fs? Yeah, did I say too many people ran 3-ofs? I must have misspoke. Yeah, there's not enough people that run like 1-ofs and 2-ofs. They have a place. You really do need to kind of like know how to ratio a deck, because you don't want to like use them randomly either. It's really important to make sure you're not, you know, trolling and making your deck less consistent than it needs to be. So you can play pretty well against stuff like Make It Rain here by playing the second Battlecaster before the Teemo. This is a pretty easy deck to like pilot for the most part. It's not hard, but you will occasionally have to do some weird decisions. You know what? I'd call it medium. I don't think it's super easy. I'd call it medium. You will have to do some weird stuff sometimes. And also, like, I mean, even beyond that, it's... The mulligan is super important to get right with this deck. If you don't mulligan properly, you're actually hurting your odds of winning with a deck like this by so much. Because it's kind of like an aggro combo deck, right? And when you think about that, that intuitively makes sense. Because, like... If you don't think about mulligans in exactly the right way, you know, you need to draw your synergy cards early. So here he's going to have Make It Rain. That's pretty much going to fuck me here. As mentioned, TF Swain is a hard counter against my deck. Oh, cool. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, and I mean, dragging the keg isn't worth it either, because we end up with a bunch of 1-health units anyway. So yeah, I mean, just kind of like take a look at this game, for example. Like, I'm glad I had that Teemo there instead of a Draven, right? And it's just ratioing. It's just probability. It's like, it's all about just finding the perfect ratio. And I want like one extra 1-drop. And, you know, Draven's really nice, but drawing Draven and Draven's biggest fan is usually kind of redundant, or drawing Draven on turn 1 in lieu of like something that could be used more aggressively doesn't feel great. Here, we have a pretty awkward hand. I mean, like, he was still able to blow us out, even if it wasn't like a super effective way to do it. And now our hand is kind of choked out, right? So we're probably basically just kind of losing. Now we have to kind of like think about how to play to our outs the best. We're going to play Experimenter pretty much on turn 6. I think we can, at this point in time, try to squeeze maximum value out of Crowd Favorite. Oh, I messed up, actually. I was supposed to play Flame Chompers and then keep the Jury Rig in hand, actually, I think. I guess we have a discard target in Crowd Favorite, just because, like, Crowd Favorite is literally useless anyway. But yeah, it was actually slightly better to keep the Chompers there, play the Chompers there, just so we could have the option for Crowd Favorite. Keep the Jury Rig in hand so that, you know, we could play for the Crowd Favorite to be a 4-3. Obviously, that's very weak, awkward stats, but sometimes that's the best you get, and you have to make do. Okay. It's an aggro combo deck, but the combo is quite basic. I think you'd be surprised, Power Cuties. I mean, like I said, it's not like the most big brain deck ever. You don't need a fucking Einstein IQ to play this deck. But I do think you might be surprised at how tricky this can be sometimes. Like, there isn't just one combo. There's actually a lot of different things you have to play for. Sometimes you play for Jinx more aggressively than others. Sometimes you need to know, like there are some matchups where you actually do go into a bit more of the value game plan rather than just like the full-on aggro. Like I said, it's not the hardest deck, but I wouldn't call it like an easy deck. I'd call it medium, or I guess maybe medium easy. Like here, you know, the decision on playing the Crowd Favorite versus the Augmented isn't actually even that easy of a decision. Probably just taking the maximum damage here. Like, the Crowd Favorite isn't great here. It's basically a 5-4. We're maximizing resources, but losing out on tempo a little bit. We don't have anything that's, like, insanely integral to use right now. But also, like, most draws off of Augmented are going to be bricked next turn anyway. We can't afford to draw something that would be bricked. I think it's probably the Augmented here. Honestly, though, just having a 5-4 is not bad. 4 health units kind of hard for them to deal with effectively. He's already played one sentry as well. He played this sentry not too loosely, actually, because he didn't want my Draven attacking there. If he's out of sentries, then the Crowd Favorite is pretty solid here. Next turn, we can develop the Experimenter. And I think at the end of the day, I should Experimenter now and just discard the Crowd Favorite. But it's not as easy as you'd think. And here we have to kill the Spider, just because I actually don't want to give him another TF in hands. I'm less afraid of the TF level up, and I don't want to let him play another card on me, because if the TF's on the board, then he has pick a card and not TF. I don't want to give him a TF. Interesting. Okay, he's got his leveled Swain here. Looking pretty bad. We kind of needed that augmented to pull something good, like a Jinx or potentially like chaining out of value, like a good second crowd favorite hand that we could play in time for this next attack. Second augmented is pretty funny. I mean, I can make one of the cards Draven. Have we actually played both of our Dravens at this point? That's actually another benefit of doing it like this, because we actually don't want too many Dravens. I mean, we do have a full board, decent amount of damage here, and we have not let him play anything off the TF, right? Which actually doesn't matter here. Make It Rain is going to luck out and hit both of our 1 health units. Feels bad.
I'm basically 1/8 gay.
At this point, yeah, I mean, I'll kill the TF. It still just kind of has to be our value play. We can't do a weird House Spider here. We do have a good grab. We're turning on the second TF in his hand, but you'll notice right now my board is, you know, less losing to red card anyway. So this is fine. If we draw a Get Excited off of this, we could play it this turn. We have 3 left in deck, I think. Wow, uses Scorched Earth like that. He's gotta have a very awkward hand to do that, I think. Like, is that actually worth it in any hand, actually? Wait, really? That's a weird one. But yeah, I mean, he's usually looking pretty scary here. His Swain will probably end up punching my face one way or another. That's good for me. Swain not having the ability to punch my face is what I want here. Looks like we're just mulliganing away the axe off of our Draven, which is pretty free. Usually this is the turn where he plays Leviathan. I don't know if that really changes our play. What we could do is try to develop our units into him next turn so none of our units get stunned. Just like go wide on a development. I mean, if he doesn't play Leviathan now, I'm not really scared. So it's kind of interesting. Like, basically by not playing now, I'm kind of trusting that my mana won't blank out. We only get punished by developing here if he plays the Leviathan, and then we're potentially only losing like 1 attacker. I don't know. It's a little awkward both ways. Because, like, you always assume he's going to play the Leviathan here. So any unit you play effectively costs 0 mana, will just get stunned. So pretty much ends up not doing anything at all. We kind of just have to pass to dodge the stuns here. There's 1 Team Mushroom. Okay, so we've got a pretty alright hand here. You know, we want to be thinking what he could have in his hand now. He could have second TF. He could have Rex. We can't beat a Rex here. There's literally no way to beat it, so no playing around that. Well, unless his Rex gets... Yeah, there's no way to beat Rex. The first step is, I think, just playing the Draven out, and then we can, like, discard the axe to see what we draw from the Draven. I don't think there's any, like, big brain sequencing here, really. We, I think, don't want the Flying Poros to get stunned out by any sort of, like, Swain effects. If he has something like a TF red card or a Make It Rain, playing my House Spider before the Zonite could matter. But I think those are getting a little too stunned anyway, so I'll play the Zonite first. I think, in all likelihood, we're probably discarding the House Spider. So now we've got an interesting play here, which is if we play the Jinx and discard the House Spider and then play 1 Poro, and then we discard the other Poro, then our Jinx has the ability to level up here. And there's no downside into playing for this, so we can just kind of like open with this. Well, the downside is we play for less elusive value, right? But we can start this by doing this. And now in the next action, we have Jinx into Poro Cannon Daring Poro, which will level the Jinx, potentially. And that Jinx is pretty scary for him. And unfortunately, the elusive win condition just, I think, isn't quite trustworthy enough. So, I do think we kind of might have to play for the Jinx here. I don't know. Like, is he? How often is he just winning off of his open attack anyway? That's actually so interesting. Do I just have to play for the full Poro and hope that it's enough? I mean, full Poro can't be enough. I would have had to have used the axe on one of the Poros. Like, full Poro literally can't be lethal here. We have 4 Poros and he's got 2 blockers. So yeah, I guess we're forced into this Jinx. Feels kind of bad. Yeah, TF is pretty expected. He's got red card. That's going to go ahead and stun one of my attackers. So he should win this game. I feel pretty happy about that. We had, obviously, very unfavored matchup. And we were able to get pretty close here, all things considered. Yeah, he has, like, the easiest open attack of his life. This is what TF Swain does at his deck. It smashes discard aggro. Absolutely dumpsters it. Okay. Here we go. I'm pretty happy with that, though. All it just comes down to is, like, making sure you're making the most efficient plays possible. Long-term, bad RNG, bad matchups. As long as you're not using those as an excuse, and instead just not minding them when you're playing well, you're gonna do very well. I really want to hear your opinion on Howling Abyss. Okay, what? Just like on how it is as a card? Well, it's trash. It's like a meme card, right? What do you mean? Howling Abyss has always been a meme card. I don't know. There's been this like weird cult. I've met a few people that are Howling Abyss believers. It's like real bad. Misfortune Lucian. It's interesting. It's another like board centric aggro deck.
I'm basically 1/8 gay.
Power underscore level 9001 gifted a tier 3 sub to Marat Duo.
Okay, so we've got, you know, here's our Draven's biggest fan coming in hot. We actually have a pretty great hand here. The one thing is, like, in a hand like this, we really want Swarm over Battlecaster. We're attacking on odds, which gives us, like, a great Draven's biggest fan into, you know, the vision thing later. But Battlecaster can't quite be good enough without a little bit of, you know, Swarm Source. We drew 2 kind of awkward cards here. You know, we still have one chance to get like a House Spider or a Zonite or a Poro Cannon. Like, look at the mulligans that way. We have so many outs, right? We have so many things that make us unawkward all of a sudden. I don't see any way that this exchange goes better for us, unfortunately. There's some hands that actually can't block this year. Like, without a crowd favorite in hands, I don't think we can get enough value out of waiting on that exchange. And the thing is, like, vision is important, but it doesn't make that exchange any better. This is the awkwardness with, like, drawing Draven earlier, and it's kind of regrettable with that hand. We might have had to play Fan on turn 2, because we still have some outs to salvage the hand if we play Fan on turn 2. It's awkward, but we could draw Zonite and Poro Cannon. Yeah, so we can't have played Biggest Fan on turn 1 there. That was a misplay. I wasn't thinking ahead to turn 2, because we have no play here. Sometimes, like, Draven can be a force to be reckoned with. Yeah, check this out. Well, okay, so House Spider doesn't work because it would have been spell mana. But if we had drawn Zonite, if we had drawn Rummage, if we had drawn Poro Cannon, any of those 9 cards, then what we would have done is, like, allowed ourselves to draw the Draven on turn 3 and actually, like, had an option on turn 2, right? That's the power of Fan. Like, drawing Draven early is actively bad. That's why Fan is good, because you don't have to... You can draw a Fan instead of Draven and then get the Draven when you need the Draven. Like, look at how big of a difference it makes here, not what in terms of probability, not in terms of what we drew. How much of a difference it makes if we had just played the Fan on turn 2 instead. We open ourselves up to much more outs. Stony Suppressor is hilarious. It doesn't actually impact my deck very much. I guess I do use Spinning Axis. Oh, that's true. Yeah, I forgot about Spinning Axis. Yeah, okay. That's fine, though, because we had a clunky hand. We were kind of forced to go into spell mana anyway. So, oddly enough, the spell mana kind of wasn't doing anything else. I'm pretty fine with this. That's good. And see, look, this is another case where, you know, Teemo's great. We needed a little bit of extra Swarm, right? And we got it. So now what we can do is, yeah, we can go ahead and just kind of, like, go a little bit wide. Our units don't really have value as blockers. We're not really gonna do a weird... You know what? I could actually do a weird block here. I could do like spinning axe and block the MF with my 2/2 if he attacks on this action. If he plays a 1-drop and then attacks, which most hands wouldn't do, then I could do Teemo into vision and then block with this the same way.
I'm basically 1/8 gay.
Swims. I'm actually here.
The one cool thing, oh, and yeah, there's the 1-drop. He actually drew it a little bit. Yeah, he's able to curve it out here. So what we can do is we can play the Teemo here. And I don't mind doing like a slightly early vision. We actually could do like chompers and vision off of our double spinning axe. That looks pretty sweet. And you know what? I don't even really mind this going like that. We could have also done a get excited, kill the MF. I can't like that as much. I don't know. Maybe that is right. I don't know. It just feels it's not actually generating much of an impact. Pretty happy with how this worked out. So our chompers is going to be pretty beefy. The first one, if we axe, we can have this chompers just casually get like 3 attack here. Yeah, I guess using Get Excited on MF was better there. It only gets countered by like a Ranger's Resolve. Which actually he can't even play because it's Stony. Yeah. Yeah, I should have Get Excited that MF instead of playing the Teemo. That would have been good. That's fine though. Because it just, you know, allows our Draven to block this 2/2, which matters a lot. Because this 2/2 getting in a minor attack is actually slightly awkward here. Not the biggest fan of the fact that this 2/2 got to attack this turn. That's fine though. This is so interesting. I think is this my first time ever seeing Stony Suppressor in an actual game? I think I might have seen it once really quickly before they lost. But yeah, it's such an interesting card. Demacia feels a little too fair right now overall, I guess I would say. Like, it is hurting my mana points here. I am actually gonna have to spend some mana. Which I think I'm okay with, just because of the nature of my hands. Let's do this in that order. If we draw a unit, we might be priced into playing it. So we can almost flip the Jinx. We can flip the Jinx here. That's sweet. Wait, we can't. Wait, what am I talking about? We can almost flip the Jinx here. I mean, it's a burst pass. I think I do want to develop in here. Second Suppressor. It's adorable. It is adorable. What if it's a third Suppressor? That would be quite the trick. Jinx is fine to play out here. It's just kind of like a quick attacker in this case. So we did give him 2 actions instead of 1 there. Which ended up being awkward. So that burst pass, it should have just been like, play Jinx. Like, giving him 2 actions as blockers before this attack was very needless. For sure. So we can kill one of the Stony Suppressors with Flame Chompers. Really not sure if it's worth it. I mean, my hands is expensive, but I don't really mind it being expensive. The nice thing is my Chomper gets to live if I go for a Suppressor. That is nice. And it looks like my 3/1 Spider isn't going to get to attack here, which is fine. Yeah, I mean, Chomper surviving is probably worth enough. I think I'm okay just killing off a Suppressor. This feels good. Yeah, I mean, here's Teemo just putting in work. Like, my 3... it's a Swarm deck, but the most awkward states are just when you don't have the ability to get an attack. I feel pretty happy about having Teemo here. Like, I've made this very awkward for him. He can't have any spells of his own. I do think Stony Suppressor is... It's definitely a tech card. It's not a bad card for sure. It's a really polarizing card. I think it's... It doesn't really have the ability to do... So when Stony Suppressor came out, a lot of people looked at it and said it's like a nuts crazy card, or, you know, some path in there, right? Some approximation of crazy. I can flip my Jinx here, and all it will cost me is discarding both Get Exciteds. Pass. So yeah, I mean we can take a couple Get Exciteds here. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't kill the Lucian. We do want to keep our Jinx alive through the Challenger Genevieve. That might be very difficult to do. We could. I think we're abandoning the Jinx altogether and trying to kill him next turn. Crowd Favorite will come out as a 7/6. Genevieve plus the MF can kill Crowd Favorite, and he can even do that off of the second Genevieve attack, which is really nasty. Really, really nasty. So Crowd Favorite's kind of bad here. And the fact that Genevieve buffed Misfortune outside of Get Excited range is nasty too. Wow. Wow. Teemo might not be able to win us the game. He can kill Jinx with a few things. And MF isn't leveling here. We might need to try to kill him next turn. Okay. Sure, he's just getting his free attack in. The only issue is, like, yeah, his stat lines work very, very well into mine, but he does have too many threats. He kind of, I think he needed to drag my Teemo with his first Genevieve attack, because my Teemo might be winning me the game now, right? Like, the fact that he didn't respect my Teemo here might end up losing him the game. It's a pretty big deal. Okay, seems perfectly fine here. Lucian is actually leveling up here, which is, I guess, potentially kind of scary. I'm fine, though. I mean, he can't deal 1 damage, right? Am I missing some way he could deal 1 damage? Because the Spider even has, like, a potential weird attack. At 1 mana, deal 1 damage in Demacia Bilge. Yeah, I'm just blocking with Draven. I can't see it. How does he punish this here? Make it rain? I think if he's got Make It Rain, we're losing anyway, right? Now that he's got Protege, though, I guess the Spider has a basically impossible time doing anything anyway. Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll block Lucian. It doesn't really matter. Why not? But yeah, like, this felt good. We have, like, a nice, like, flexible, you know, elusive semi-win condition. And we're still at the mercy of his last card in his hand, but the way his deck is built, it's really hard for that to actually be a spell that can do anything about it, right? It's like he's running all the Stony Suppressors. He's probably just, like, a full unit deck. It's probably, like, second Lucian into Relentless Pursuit is a pretty likely thing for it to be. Our Teemo should often just be winning here. If I develop into him, is there a punishment? How could he punish me for developing into him? I don't know. It's a good question. But yeah, that feels good. Like, Teemo is able to put in work here, right? And obviously this, like, looks kind of cherry picked. And yeah, don't get me wrong. It's like, sure, it's kind of cherry picked. But it's like, this is the kind of game that will happen every once in a while. Like, you just get so much extra value. Being able to just be a little bit more flexible. When you look at how all these games are playing out, just having, like, a better ratio of 1-drops is important. Like, at the end of the day, here's the biggest thing. Here's the biggest thing. If you're running 3-ofs everything, the thing is, and I've explained it like this before, but you have to think about cards when you're deck building. You think about them in terms of not the card itself, but the role that the card is a subcategory of, right? Like, this isn't a 1-of Teemo. What this is it's a, let's say, a 7th 1-drop. If we called Draven's Biggest Fan and Zona Urchin 1-drops, Teemo's my 7th 1-drop. And this is a deck that just wants, you want to be able to have granularity, you know, to modulate your curve the way you want to, right? So the thing is, like, when you run nothing but 3-ofs, you're abusing power cards, and don't get me wrong, 3-ofs are good, and like this deck runs a shit ton of 3-ofs. But just in terms of how we have to think about it, if you're running nothing but 3-ofs, you're restricted to having 6, 9, or 12 1-drops, right? And there's a lot of reasons that we would want 7 or 8 or 10, right? Like, that's all. That's it. So, like, a lot of people look at this team and they're like, "Oh, that's weird." In reality, it's just the 7th 1-drop, and Teemo's a solid 1-drop. It's like, some people run an academic, by the way, too, which I'm fine with, but it's not a 1 of Teemo. It's just the 7th 1-drop. That's all. And that, when you look at 1-ofs and 2-ofs closely, that's kind of all they ever are, because all cards, it's not like, this is the easiest example, but when you look deeper, all cards are really just like representations of their subcategories, right? Like, when you look at, let's say, Draven, Draven he's two things. He's a swarm rewarder, because usually what you're discarding with Axe is vision for, that's the nut draw. And Draven is also a potential, like, discard fodder value tool, right? Like, it's not just Draven, it's what Draven is. And there's other cards that do Draven's job. We have a lot of ways of discarding vision nowadays, especially now with, like, Poro Cannon, that, like, just, and, obviously we have 5 Dravens because we have 5 opportunities to draw Draven. But as I'm playing this deck, I just don't need that 6th Draven, because it's not even just the 6th Draven. It's like, if we're counting Poro Cannon and 2 Rummages and, all the ways we have of triggering the cards that we might need to trigger, like Vision or even Flame Chompers, we certainly have enough of those, right? So just think about it like that. And if you're thinking, like, a 1-of isn't a 1-of. Like, don't think about it like a 1-of. Just think about the category and not the individual card, That matters more than anything else. 1-ofs look weird when maybe they're cards that defy categorization, like cards that are higher synergy that... Don't get me wrong, there are some decks I'll look at and I'll be like, 1-of, what's the point? Like, there's certain cards that might have accelerating returns when you draw them, or there's certain cards that have build around costs, and those are reasons to not run 1-ofs. But it's just important to understand the distinction, because I think a very common new player mistake is not running a lot of 3-ofs. I think, like, the way it works is when you're a new player, you probably run a shit ton of 1-ofs and 2-ofs. And then as you get better, you start learning, let's run more 3-ofs. And you run more 3-ofs. And as you get a little bit better, you kind of bounce back a little bit and you run a bit more 1-ofs and 2-ofs. So that isn't to say that there's not a lot of players that should run more 3-ofs, because there are. Oops. Here, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Tom Soraka. So we've got Poro Cannon, we've got Jury Rig. It's a nice opener, and you know what? We actually really like Battlecaster here. I think we can kick the Jinx and just try to get like a little bit more Swarm compatibility. I like Crowd Favorite over Jinx in these early stages. We've got some, some nice tools here. We can go ahead and start developing, our board presence already. Part of the reason Poro Cannon is so good in this deck, by the way, is like when you think about what this card offers this deck, it is multiple things. Poro Cannon is a Swarm card, and it is a discard card, which makes it categorically insane. That's crazy, because it can be used for the Swarm part of the combo, or it can be used for the Swarm payoff part of the combo. It's impossible to describe how big of a deal that is, because the whole deck is like hinged on trying to draw the right half of the cards together, and Poro Cannon is flexibly either half. Again, insane. Absolutely ridiculous. So we have to think like, we have to either play House Spider or Battlecaster this turn. We have to think like, we're probably going to play them both before our next attack. So what's the draw that makes us not play both of them? If I were to draw Draven, I might actually play it instead of House Spider here. Whereas if I play House Spider, there's kind of nothing I'm going to draw that makes me, you know, the Battlecaster just ends up making more sense. I could even draw like, I don't know if I would Zonite here. It's a pretty good hand for him. He's got like the kind of accelerator he needs. Yeah, so here's Zonite Urchin. We're probably just going to go as wide as humanly possible. What we could also do is try to make his Crusty Codger not a great blocker, right? What we're going to do is let's get reactivity on this board, right? So check this out. Like, we don't want to Zonite yet. We're going to either House Spider or Battlecaster, but we do know we're going to Poro. And he also sees we've got a Poro in our hand. Let's play Poro first, and then maybe his play will actually inform whether we're House Spiting or Battlecastering. So he's passing. The benefit of playing Battlecaster over House Spider is basically we give him no good blocks, right? Because whatever he would use to block the Codger, like the Scuttler will go to 3 attack off of both Battlecasters, and the Battlecasters will give each other 3 attacks. And the ability to threaten the Codger is a big deal, and he can't really protect that with anything. So I actually really just like playing the other Battlecaster here. He can't efficiently protect it. He can use Pale or Guiding Touch, but those are not great for him here. And this is kind of like the only board I want. So we have no good block for his Codger without having to use a trick, which I'm fine with because then he's committing resources. Hope you enjoy your rest. Your content is amazing. I like my content sometimes, and I really don't like it at others. Like, I feel good right now. I'm kind of like I've had real problems controlling my brain lately. It's like some days I'm just in such a crazy slump, and some days I feel like I'm, you know, lit up. And it's really, and I think a lot of people are like this, where it's like you just need to be able to kind of identify a pattern and min-max what works best for you. But I feel good right now. I wish, you know, and this is kind of like part of what I'm going to work towards, but I'm going to try to like figure out what the patterns are and how to like, you know, optimize this. Is your sugar intake high? No. He's got Brokeback Protector. A pretty scary card. So now let's think as we always do about like whether we're, you know, whether we don't want him developing into us. Like whether we're going to play the crowd favorite this turn and lose, you know, the maximum stat, or whether we're going to play it, you know, maybe next turn. What that's going to mean for us. Having that little point of HP actually matters. He doesn't really have a valuable attack here at all. Like having the +1/+1 matters. And honestly, my board going as wide as possible per attack really matters too. He's not running TF, and which is an important aspect of this decision, right? Because like he can't actually punish me developing, right? Which is a big deal. So what that means is I actually might be totally fine just playing like the House Spider here. It's Depression or something like that. Yeah, no, I'm checking out all the options. It very possibly could be, you know, one similar thing. Because that can really happen. So like check out what's happening here. I'm thinking, you know what? Well, obviously you have to plan ahead. You have to think one turn ahead. And I'm thinking to myself, and I might be mistaken in my logic, but my reasoning is that deck doesn't really run a ton of development punishers. What are development punishers? Usually it's a card that at slow speed swings 2 combats. So that's like Iceveil Archer, Arachnoid Sentry, or just something that plays 2 units, like Petty Officer or House Spider. His deck kind of runs none of those. And so, and no TF either. You know, nothing at slow speed that's crazy. So what I'll do is I'll try to like, you know, maximize the value on this attack, I think. By playing the crowd favorite after. We're losing the spider forever, the 1/1 spider forever, but the 1/1 spider actually kind of can't matter here. Like, I just played the House Spider last turn as a 2/2. And I could have played Zonite Urchin instead, but I actually value Zonite Urchin's flexibility of unbreaking hands more than I value the extra 1/1. If you look at how this game is going, like, we're not running out of steam. We've got Augmented to replenish our board one last time. We just want to push for, like, the final bit of damage, right? So, you know, last turn, we're thinking, okay, do we play for maximum value on the attack? What we did so when you look at these two actions, it's not just crowd favorite getting the +1/+1, it's also us getting House Spider. And House Spider is important because it's a 4/2, right? It's a 4/2 because we have the Battlecasters. So we're getting a 4-2, and we're getting an extra +1/+1 on a crowd favorite. And the only downside is we give him an action. What's his action? Well, in this case, it's just Star Shepherd, which is a nothing action, which means we get rewarded. We made the, well, we can't say we made the correct play, but within the context of this game's result, we did what we needed to do. And this is actually a lot of you guys, ask about ratioing. We were talking about it before. And you guys know I was running 2 Tahm Kench, 1 Twisted Fate. Well, this is part of the reason for that. Even a single Twisted Fate might have made me play that differently. Because its presence in the deck, especially visibly, means it is something you have to be aware of. Even at, like, somewhat low odds. That, as a huge punisher, even at low odds, that has to be something that's in my mind. So, like, and that's why it depends on the meta, but there's nothing really wrong with ratioing, like, 2 Tahm Kench, 1 Twisted Fate like that. That's why I like using that. So, we want to augmented experimenter for maximum value. It looks like we kind of want to do it as early as possible, so we can just Zonite the Draven's Big's fan. We draw a Jinx, which is, I guess a good draw. It means we have to play Jinx before the augmented, but can't be a bad draw here. And our deck should just kind of run us over. I'm kind of wondering if Star Spring is a bait as a card. I actually think the deck might do better if you just cut it completely, which is something I theorized early on. Like, when we were theory crafting the deck and building it, I was like, let's cut Star Spring. And honestly, the way I see these games play out, like, every time the Soraka Tahm deck does well, it's off of not having Star Spring and just winning off of Tahm. And part of that is because I've been playing a lot of discard aggro in just the last couple of days. But Star Spring is just really not threatening at all. Especially when you draw multiple copies of Star Spring, it ends up being kind of a lose condition. I could see versions of this deck cutting down on it, or maybe cutting it entirely. Which is another thing we did when we were theory crafting. You might remember when I was building, like, Star Spring deck with Kuvira before the patch hit. It only lasted like 30 minutes. We kind of canceled the deck build really fast on that one. But we were basically... we ended up taking Star Spring down to a 1-of. Which looks super weird. Doesn't that look weird? Because it's, in theory, it's a high synergy card. Running a 1-of a high synergy card. That's so bizarre. Now, the question is, do we develop into this attack? Or do we just maybe attack as is? This attack doesn't, really get too much better by developing in. He could actually do enough of a blocker for it to matter. I think in this case, we'll attack in and then rely on our potential over-the-top after. The one downside is our Jinx does have the ability. If we go in now, we actually might not be able to protect our Jinx. Let's go for the augmented experimenter first, actually. Let's do this. It's a little weird. This might not be the correct play. It's a very weird play to do, for sure. So he's playing Tahm Kench. That's good. That's kind of what we wanted, because it means, he doesn't have the ability to... well, it depends on what we draw, but he might not have the ability to stop, like, a rocket from coming in after. So, we can push a little bit more damage. We do need to damage one of these. We are going to have to hit the undamaged one just in case he has Guiding Touch. I guess he would Guiding Touch face anyway, so you could hit the other 2-3. It shouldn't matter. And, I mean, I feel like we should be pretty good here. Wow, that's a sick draw. Holy shit. Sonic Vision. What the hell just happened? Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm getting off that. Honestly, it's kind of crazy, though. He could actually have another blocker if I develop. And if he plays another blocker, then my Zonite Vision actually can get a little bit punished. We are getting, like, 2 damage guaranteed, though, even against the other blocker. Yeah, I have to do it. I actually have to do it. This Zonite Vision is actually just too crazy. We just had too crazy of a nut draw. The question is, does he have enough blockers? Like, my Poro might not be mattering. Because, our board is wider than his, right? Like, he's not really able to block my Zonite anyway. So in this scenario, we actually don't want the Poro. We actually just want to play for the maximum stats here. So let's actually override the Poro and take the best attack we can here, right? This is kind of like our final attack, and it should be enough to basically end the game. The Vision does mean, he can't Soraka block the Jinx, which, I don't know if you want it to do anyway. But either way, we're just kind of maximizing our damage here. That feels really good. So yeah, I was talking more about Star Spring. You know, we were talking about ratioing last game and when you should run 3 ofs and when you should run 1 ofs. Let's talk a little bit deeper about that with like the Tahm Kench Soraka deck, you know? So the biggest reason to run a high quantity of things, here's the biggest reason. This is kind of like an older version. I think Broad Back to Protector, we have to go back to running Broad Back to Protector. So don't focus. I can make some changes like 2 Astral. We can run Broadback to over Hunting Fleet because like it's just so much better against the meta right now. You have to run it against like all the aggression right now, which is where we started the deck. We started with 3 Broadback to Protector, and then we cut it for Hunting Fleet just because in the early days there or specifically day 1 there wasn't enough aggro. Now there's enough that yeah, I'm gonna want to run more Broadback to Protectors. So it doesn't matter the exact build, but let's take a look at some of the specific ratioing that's going on here and about how we talked about it last game. Because it's super counterintuitive. So cards are a lot of things. A lot of people say the phrase "you want to run 3 ofs to make your deck more consistent," and that they're either using the word consistent in a very weird way, they mean a different word, or it's completely nonsense. Because it's not consistency that you're going for per se. The reason you want to run 3 ofs is to abuse cards that have a higher power level, basically. Or if they are combo pieces, which the majority of the cards aren't combo pieces, but if they're combo pieces, then yes, the combo pieces, you can maximize the consistency. If there's no other potential card that could fulfill that niche, then you are maximizing your consistency of that combo by maxing your quantity. But that's all a lot of asterisks. Okay. And deck building cost matters a lot. There's a lot of cards that we can really only run as a high quantity there's a lot of cards that you can't run as a 1 of or a 2 of just because they have deck building costs. So, you know what? Let's use a better example for this actually. Let's take I think a great example for this is the Lee Sin Zed deck actually. So someone asked me a great question when I was playing in the tournament an hour ago. Someone asked me a great question, which is like, Diana's good. What if we ran 2 Diana, 1 Zed? Because Zed is really bad to double draw because it gets a complete brick as a spell. Like you actually, I say complete brick. It's not literally useless, but it's pretty close, right? Zed is pretty bad to double draw. So why don't we run 2 Diana, 1 Zed? Well, there's a couple issues with that. The most obvious issue is even though Zed is bad to double draw, Diana is great to double draw. Getting more Pale Cascades is actually part of the reason we're running Diana. So cutting down on the quantity isn't great. But another really big thing in Diana is that she has a deck building cost that we need to synergize with, right? And it can't not. To run Diana, we have to run Lunari Duskbringer. Not necessarily as a 3 of. Some versions run 2. But it's, part of the synergy. Dusk Petal Dust it seems kind of weird, but just having the fact that it's a spell for Lee is kind of why this works the way it does. And the deck needs a 1-drop anyway. And so if I cut down on ratios of Diana, then I'm hurting the Duskbringer that's already in my deck. Now what I could do is cut down on ratios of both. But then the problem is because it's a kind of a pocket combo that we want to play for, if I cut down on ratios of Duskbringer just to match the fact that we cut down on ratios of Diana, then I'm drawing the pocket combo less reliably, right? Because, each half multiplies out and you get less reliability of the total. Here's another issue, because it's actually not just Duskbringer. It's not just Duskbringer that's the deck building cost of Diana. I think a lot of people think that it might be. It's also Sonic Wave and even to a degree Mentor. Sonic Wave is good with Diana to the degree that part of the reason we're able to run 3 Sonic Wave instead of 2 is because we're running 3 Diana. We have extra targets. The same is true for Mentor of the Stones. Part of the reason we're able to run 3 Mentor, some versions are running 2. It could be right to run 3 either way, but part of the reason we're running 3 is because it has a good synergy with Diana. It just gives us an additional buff target that curves with Mentor. With Mentor, you really need a 2-mana unit or a 4-mana unit. And most things you want to buff for 3-mana units, which is super awkward with Mentor. It's like buffing Zed or buffing Tasty. It doesn't fit together really super well in every case. So Diana has a pretty big deck building cost here. She's worth it, but it does mean part of her ratioing, you know, she's got a great double draw, amazing double draw, Pale Cascade. This is actually one of the strongest traits of champions in the entire game, because cards, when you draw them, have very majorly diminishing returns. People don't talk about this at all. People don't talk about this at all. This is the single strongest component. This is the single reason why champions are better than other cards, because when you double draw them, you have a different card. This is the fundamental downside of running 3-ofs. And this is the problem with the consistency argument. Again, consistency can apply with a lot of asterisks. It's just a bad word to use in that scenario, honestly, because it's kind of misleading. The problem with the consistency argument is that this is your deck, okay? This is your deck. It's got 40 cards. You're running 40 cards. I wouldn't run 41 cards because that would make my deck less consistent. Because then I'd be drawing, every draw would be into 41 cards instead of 40. Lower quantity of deck size is more consistent because that's less cards. That's good. Here's the problem. No matter what we do to the deck, it's still going to be 40 cards. It might be 17 different cards if we run a lot of 3-ofs, but it's going to be 40 cards. Here's the difference. The first copy of a card you draw is fundamentally very different value from the second copy of the card you draw. In almost every case. And it's almost always heavy diminishing returns. Heavy diminishing returns. Like, if I draw one Grizzled Ranger, I'm just going to pick a random fucking example in a different region. If I draw one Grizzled Ranger, I have a 4-mana 3/1. It does everything it says. If I draw a second Grizzled Ranger, it's a lot worse. It's a lot worse. I can never play the second one until after I've played the first one. And that means I can't play it on turn 4. It's not giving me any additional actions or options per turn. It is a much worse card. It is not the same card. They are two different cards. The first Ranger you draw and the second Ranger you draw are very different cards. They do completely different things to the game. And there's a lot of cards that you don't want to double draw, right? Now, it depends on the card. Most cards have diminishing returns to double draw. Champions that have bad champion spell cards like Zed, you don't want to double draw. There are some cards that arguably have some amount of accelerating returns when you double draw, and this is where some of the champions come in. Like, the second Diana I draw is sometimes more valuable than the first Diana I draw. How crazy is that? That's crazy. That's nuts. And a lot of champions are like that. Swain is like that too. You know, any champion that has a good champ spell, that's such a big component. The fact that they get to run 6 Phlox is insane, right? It's insane. And it's part of how that deck functions. The second Swain they play is a Flock instead of a Swain. And that's so good because you don't want a second Swain when you have a Swain on board, right? So you really have to think about deck building in that way. Different cards have different amounts of diminishing returns. And there's no easy rule of thumb. I have to say, just you have to kind of like play out the games in your head a little bit and think about how those diminishing returns are going to go and like how those cards will like pile up on some. Because there's some cards that double drawing them is absolutely horrendous. And there's some cards where the second copy might have slight diminishing returns, but nothing really major, right? But so what would be an example of a non-champion card that has accelerating returns? In a vacuum, that's really difficult. Usually this is where theoretical, like, it has to be like a narrow game plan, basically, for cards to have accelerating returns as opposed to diminishing returns. So when you're juggling the quantities of a card in your deck, what you're doing is you're fundamentally weighing kind of like two main factors. And there's a lot of factors, but there's two main factors. One factor is this idea of the base value of a card. You want to abuse nuts cards. That's easy. The second value is diminishing returns on drawing them, right? And there's other factors, a lot of other factors, but usually it's a race of, Are these cards OP enough that drawing 2 of them feels good? Yes, that's a 3F. And that's how a lot of the starts of deck building is done. And there's kind of nothing card games can do around that to a degree. Like, even if you balance really well, there still will be a lot of 3Fs. What I can say is that on average, in a perfectly balanced game or a more balanced game, there will be more 1Fs and 2Fs. And that's because, again, we have those two fundamental notions of diminishing returns per draw fighting with just objective power level, right? That is true. If it's more balanced, there will be more 1Fs and 2Fs. It's a broad generalization. It doesn't really do much for you as a generalization, but it might help you understand how the probability of ratioing works, right? So now that we've kind of like talked about all of that, let's talk about what I was talking about in this deck, which is the idea of, you know what, it seems super weird, some of the ratioing. Like, I as far as I could see, I'm sure there were other people doing this just because nobody's unique. There's nothing new under the sun. But I didn't see anyone else running 2 Tom, 1 Twist of Fate. The reason for this is pretty straightforward. I kind of explained it during that game. You know, the Twisted Fate 1 of, it gives my deck a role that the deck needs. It's a role player, which is that it's a solid development punisher, basically. Which can mean a lot of things. It can be gold card or red card. It depends on the board state. But it means the opponent has to think before developing into me. Which there's kind of nothing else in this deck that actually is a big development punisher. But also, Tahm Kench is powerful as a card. Double drawing it doesn't feel great, you know, with Bayou Brunch. And Tahm Kench does have a deck building cost, but it is shared with cards that are already in the deck, if that makes sense. And don't get me wrong, whether you run the 1 Twist of Fate or the third Tahm Kench as a meta call, I was running 3 Tahm Kench too. It just depends on what I'm running into. It's such a small, it's one card. It's not like a huge deal, but in some situations you will want to run 1 Twist of Fate instead. And the difference between Tahm Kench and Diana, a big one is Tahm Kench's champion card sucks. It's not useless, but it's not great, right? It's not like Pale Cascade, so double drawing Tahm Kench isn't as good. A big part of that, though, is that Tahm Kench doesn't have a committal deck building cost in this deck. By making my Tom a 2 of instead of a 3 of, I'm not, at least in my opinion, I might be mistaken actually, but in this build of the deck at least, I thought did I forget to say if I was trying to like show better version with like the kind of like back to Astral broke back. But Tahm Kench didn't have as much of a committal deck building cost because all of these cards are kind of playing for alternate targets, right? Broke back protector, what's it called? This broad back protector. All of these cards are playing for alternate targets. Like the fact that Tahm Kench goes to a 2 of in this list doesn't actually fundamentally really change how the list wants to be built. Like the cards like Astral and Bastion are still working with Soraka. I think it should be effectively the same degree. I could see like cutting maybe one of them, and the win conditions in the matchups are all kind of the same. So don't get me wrong. If it's a meta where you need Tahm Kench to win games, then of course Tahm Kench is a 3F. But it's not like it's going to be fundamentally necessarily a 3F, right? And that lastly brings me to Starspring. And Starspring's a weird one because I just said the phrase, and if you're watching, I was saying that before when we were playtesting this concept of a deck, we were cutting Starspring down. We cut it to a 2 of, and then we cut it to a 1 of, and then we were thinking about cutting it completely just because we weren't sure about it as a card. So here's the thing about Starspring, which is that we have to ask ourselves, does it fundamentally invalidate some of the decisions in the deck in a major way by cutting it down on quantity? And I actually don't think that's true, which is super weird. But this deck is actually, it's often winning off of the just like Soraka Tahm Kench game plan. Sometimes, TF is flippable here because we actually have a lot of cheap draws if they can't kill it. And we have a protection racket. Like, usually the win is the engines. And here's the thing. Double drawing Starspring is really bad. It's actually insanely bad. It's hard to explain. If you've played this deck a lot, you'll know how bad drawing the second Starspring feels. It's insanely bad. Especially, like, there's some rare hands where it ends up being okay, but it is basically completely useless. It is almost unusable. It's basically unusable. And what that means is like, man, it's a danger running 3F. So we have to juggle the power level versus the danger of double drawing. And this, by the way, divergent paths, I'm very confident divergent paths is absolutely trash in this list for that reason. I don't want to run a 4th Star Spring, let alone a worse 4th Star Spring. And, you know, playing this deck a lot, the more I play it, because I've played it a lot and I've seen it played a lot, it's mostly winning off of, like, the engine stabilization. Star Spring is kind of like almost a matchup-specific tech card. And I'm thinking, okay, so it could be 2 of, right? It could be a 2 of. A lot of people... I think there's one thing that people say that goes around a lot, which is... if you need to draw it early, you should run more copies of the card. And that's like not really true. If it's a busted card that wins you the game if you draw it early, then you should run more copies of it. But that's kind of because you want to run busted cards, right? Like, I think in general that ends up being true in terms of like a curve reasoning. Like if it's a cheap card, running more cheap cards is better for your curve than running more expensive cards. That's true. But this notion of... I hear a lot of people say, and people were commenting when we were cutting down Star Springs, people were commenting, you know, it's either a 0 of or a 3 of. Because it's like, if you're not running for the game plan, why run it at all? And that logic just doesn't really work here. It does work for like high synergy deck build logic, but at the end of the day, our game plan is still stabilizing off of, you know, the early units, and we're still, you know, triggering Soraka level up quite quickly, and we still have, you know, again, the deck building cost. It's a high synergy deck, but the deck building cost is eaten by the fact that we are not all in on Star Spring compared to other components. Think about it like this, okay? This is kind of be my final point. I've explained this in a lot of different ways, but I think it's really integral to understand this. Right? So here's like the final summary to kind of like all the points I'm making, which is this, okay? And I am going to need to whip out the paint on this one. When you have this concept of synergy, synergy is multiplicative. So we've got 2 fundamental aspects happening here. One is this, and one is this. This is, oops, sorry, I need to put it in frame. Whoops. We've got 2 fundamental concepts here. One is this and one is this. This is value. We call this additive property. And we've got synergy, which is multiplicative, which leads to usually these divergent game plans, or, you know, one side of the combo needs to interact with another side of the combo, right? It's kind of how it works. These are the 2 fundamental things that are happening in the game. And you'll see this reflected in different metas. In metas where it's very value oriented, you'll see decks that are built in a very linear way, whereas synergy metas have interesting deck building and polarizing matchups. It's upsides and downsides. Here's the thing about multiplication. It's actually really easy to understand mathematically. Just draw a fucking box, okay? And I've explained this before, but when you have any sort of multiplicative concept, draw a box. One side of the box represents, let's not use that, that's kind of confusing. One side of the box represents width and one side represents length. And the value of this energy, because it's a multiplicative concept, can be roughly summarized as the area of the box, right? It's that simple. It actually is that simple. So let me go ahead and give you a random example. I'll use a very, very basic example. But here's the idea. We have a late game control deck, right? A late game control deck, and you want a certain amount of survival tools and a certain amount of payoff to the survival, right? This is the easiest example. It's the example I always use because it's not even like a fundamental archetype. It's just the notion of a stall or control deck in general. And every deck that plays slow has to obey this law, right? We have a box. So we can have a deck. Maybe let's look at different versions of decks. But here's the trick. To maximize area, when you're multiplying a rectangle, you want it to be as close to a square as possible. It's that easy. When you're dealing with, you have in the deck builder these two different sides, right? Let's say one side is going to be, these are my early survival tools. So let's call this S for survival. And this side is going to be my payoff, or P. You want to balance them. It's that simple. And this is just a way of visualizing it. And there's some weird concepts that you can get into, like more than 2 dimensions if you think about it in different ways. We're going to go with 2-dimensional now just because this is the easiest way to understand it. But the most important thing to understand is that it's not judging a quantity of cards. It's kind of judging like an average value per card, right? Some decks will be a perfectly balanced square just by running like Ledger's Atrocity and then 34 survival cards. In some metas, something like that will happen, right? So you're not looking at the amount of cards. You're just looking at trying to balance the survival conditions versus the payoff conditions. Because if you have too much survival, if you put, like, let's say this is a perfect square. Let's say it's a 7x7. So our value is, 49 or whatever. So if we have, let's say we skew it too much for survival and it's not enough for payoff. A good example of this would be like a pure Anivia deck, right? So let's say we go +3 here for survival to 10, and let's say we go to 4 here, down to 4 for 40, we end up with like 40 value. And this is like, I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting that just because you have two constituent components that are effectively working together in terms of trying to not just provide value when combined with each other, but also as tools to reliably draw like one half or the other, you need to think about it. You don't need this example, but I think it's kind of fun to think about it in this way. This isn't how you should think about it, but this is a good way to start understanding it. So here's what you have to understand next, which is that, again, like I said, we're not talking about individual cards. We're talking about cards as like a subcategory of cards of things, right? So like, for example, in discard aggro, when we were building that before, we had to balance a few factors. Let's keep it simple and let's say 2. But the factors we're balancing are discard payoff, or let's say the factors we're balancing are like swarm and swarm payoff or something like that, right? And that's why, obviously this is kind of like how you have to approach building the deck. You want an equal amount swarm payoff. And that's exactly why I was talking about why Daring Poro was so good. Not Daring Poro, Poro Cannon. Because it has the flexibility of being either, which is insane. It's fundamentally, the fact that it breaks this entire system wide open just by being either side. Whenever you have a combo where there's a card that can be either side that you need, it's ridiculous. It's always broken. What are good examples of that happening in Runeterra? What are good examples of that? Do you guys, I can't think of like too many off the top of my head. Draven is a good one as a card. I'm still thinking about discard aggro just because it gives you the axes, which could be discards or that could be discard fodder, right? That's kind of crazy, right? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So here's the final thing. Here's the point I'm getting to with all this. What we have to do is we have to take, just like thinking about it in this term, and like look at this deck and how this deck is winning games. If this was a Starspring deck, the axis we would have is like, okay, what we'd have to be thinking about is like, okay, this is one side. So this is like basically, drawing Starspring. And then we everything else is like basically ways of getting it to work, right? Either making it more reliable in one way or another. And in that kind of deck, you would absolutely run Divergent Paths. And you would absolutely run 3 Star Springs. Here's the problem, though, which is kind of like, that's not how this deck actually ends up working out. What it really is kind of like a pure... I think it's better... Well, obviously, any model is going to be an oversimplification to a degree, but it's more so a deck that's built around sticking some kind of engine and winning off of it, with different engines having different amounts of synergy, right? So like, for example, Starspring is a good combo with Soraka. It levels Soraka a little bit faster. Tom Kench and Soraka are good combos. We want our different engines to be comboing together, but none of them are actually necessary to winning the game on their own. And Starspring is actually kind of only wins pretty specific matchups and pretty specific hand states. The best states for Starspring are like like War Mothers. That kind of deck is kind of where Starspring ends up being maybe your win condition, right? And so like when you think about it like that, so think about it as like, okay, every card has these diminishing returns, big diminishing returns in Starspring's case, and think about it like, okay, so one half of my deck is an engine, let's say an engine that I'm trying to enable or stick, and the others are enablers. I'm just gonna write E for enabler, which is confusing because the engine starts with E. And engines are like 3 Soraka, it could be 2 or 3 Tahm Kench depending on your version. Let's just say 3 Tahm Kench because that's the normal version. We don't really need to run TF. We've got 3 Tahm Kench, and then we've got potential like stabilizer tool. Like against aggro, you can consider Broadback kind of like the same thing because Broadback basically wins you the game against aggro if they can't kill it. So like, and that's a lot of the matchups right now. So yeah, I mean, let's call 3 Broadback, and then suddenly you've got 2 Starspring. So instead of 3 Starspring, we're going from like 12 down to 11 because again, we're lumping these all as win conditions, and that's the thing. Like, it's not a deck that uses Starspring to win. That's just not what it is. Double drawing Starspring is awful. Drawing Starspring without drawing one of the primary engines is bad. And, it's a tight deck. It's a high synergy deck. We do want to fit more stuff in. By the way, the multiplication addition thing is why synergy decks are tighter than value decks, slot-wise, which intuitively should make sense because of course, when you're playing for each individual point in like multiplication, like combo pieces, you're going to have less wiggle room for like any individual card, right? There's a lot of things that just can't go. And suddenly I'm like, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of using this as an example to talk about how I think about deck building. It's a meta call. Like there are some metas where you will run 3 Starsprings, and I can also say there's some metas where you're gonna run 0. I can't give you an answer for how many Starsprings to run, but what I can tell you is it's not a 3 of auto include. The deck doesn't fall apart when you cut 1 or 2 or 3, and that you have to be thinking about it flexibly in these ways. That's it. That's kind of my only point here. And I know that's gonna seem like anticlimactic to a lot of you guys because like you might have been wanting like some kind of conclusion or some kind of proof, but it's just the most important is like the way of thinking about it, and this idea of like how much my diminishing returns are going to cost me, right? It doesn't really matter that we're not like drawing it too early in that cases. If we're running 3 Starsprings, we might have to be on like a really awkward build of the deck, but everything in the deck is still the way it wants to be, right? No matter how many Starsprings we're running. We can talk about like, mulliganing away as well. That's all just like, a flexible aspect. And I can say that, in a version like this, part of the, once you cut like 1 Starspring, then suddenly the 3rd Tahm Kench is a lot better because it's more of like it's kind of like the same exchange, right? Like when we cut Starspring for an early stabilizer, that can let us cut Twisted Fate for the 3rd Tahm Kench and kind of have a more balanced deck that isn't like losing as much to aggression. We take out 1 swap here and then the other swap there, right? I'm kind of like losing my core explanation. But yeah, that's kind of like the most important way to think about this deck. I wanted to talk more about like ratioing of cards. I think in this video and the last one, I've kind of like explained it decently well, at least. But I think a lot of people really just don't think too much about what ratioing is, especially with spells. There's a lot of spells that I'll run one-ofs and people will be like, oh, that's weird. But in reality, it's just like, especially in a tournament where maybe there's open deck lists, running more higher densities of one-ofs makes more sense because your opponent has to play around more things. Which it might sound kind of weird at first, but it does make sense. And yeah, that's kind of just ratio deciding in a nutshell. There's very few things that are hard limits. One final point I'll make is that, so Soraka's champ spell sucks, but I think Soraka ends up being, at least like for how the matchup tables in the current meta are in my head, everything's meta dependent. Soraka, in my opinion, ends up being kind of like more, sort of central to the entire deck building concept here. So the deck feels a lot worse when we don't draw Soraka, as opposed to when we don't draw Tahm Kench. So even though Soraka's champ spell is bad, in fact, it's basically just as bad as Tahm Kench's. Might be worse, might be better. It's about the same. it's worth risking double drawing her there because her inherent value is worth more, and the way the deck is built is more around Soraka than Tahm Kench. Now, that falls apart. The 2 of Tahm Kench falls apart in a meta where you need 3 Tahm Kenches, but that's more meta dependent, whereas Soraka is more like centric on how this deck is built, right? All right, that's kind of like it for this explanation. That was kind of like a long run. I wanted to talk about ratioing just because I think so many people really fundamentally misunderstand it. I get asked so often like why I'm running like a one of here or a one of there, but as long as you're thinking about it in those ways, you know, one ofs can be completely nonsensical, I guess sometimes, but I only run one ofs in situations where they do have diminishing returns, or I do want a unique component of the deck of something I don't have enough of, right? There has to be a reason for it. You know? All right. So I've got only a little bit of time. I've got an hour left until I have to leave for my flight. I'll probably play, you know, a couple more games. I know not a lot of people are interested in these super weird explanations. I find it interesting. I'm kind of nerdy like that, I guess. I'm not trying to like, I don't know. They're like, a lot of people will be like, well, why did he explain that with like the stupid MS Paint thing? I think it's an interesting way to visualize it. It's just a cool angle that a lot of people don't think about. That makes it kind of more intuitive to some people. But I definitely could have made it a shorter explanation. I just find it interesting to kind of like add all those angles, you know? Okay, let's actually play this video game, huh? I know, that's a novel concept. So in this matchup, you know, we're keeping the jury rig. We do want to mulligan a little bit more aggressively for these kind of like combo pieces since we're kicking it. So let's see what we can hit here. We can play the Draven's biggest fan now. We kind of have to just because we're forced to play on curve. Like I said, you don't really often want to play this early if you're looking for draws, but we have a turn 2 play, so we don't mind drawing Draven on turn 2. If we didn't have a turn 2 play, we would really mind drawing Draven on turn 2. Sorry about that. I had to see a guy about a thing. I'm good. We're good. Oh. What are your rates for game design consulting? Some of my friends have been making a card game for fun and we're thinking about asking you to take a look at it. Message me on... You know what? Don't actually message me for the next week, because I'm going away until next Thursday. When I'm back, message me on Discord. It's the best way to get in touch. So a good player with top deck vision here. I usually charge it quite a bit, but if it's a project that like looks really interesting to me, and or if it has like a, I don't know, I end up being pretty flexible. It just depends, I guess. Yeah, I probably have to develop crowd favorite into this attack. I think there's kind of no way around that. We'll do one action. We actually get hurt by Avalanche, even though Avalanche doesn't kill crowd favorite. I can't let him stop my 6-5 from being a 6-5. So, and also, I mean, he's kind of telegraphing he doesn't have Avalanche with the Spider, as well as pretty much, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a very valuable Avalanche anyway. Why are you running the one of Teemo? Oh, god damn it. God, it's probably not a troll either. Fuck. This is the problem with streaming. This is the problem with streaming, man. Here we go again. Oh, jeez. I can almost flip the Jinx this turn, but I cannot. Fortunately for me, he's just ramping into more ramp. This is the new meme. This is this card. Like, I'm gonna ramp into ramp. Oh, yeah. And then this happens. It's really funny, though, huh? That's a nut draw. I mean, mostly we're worried about, like, weird whales and shit, but honestly, with the vision nut draw, I think we're pretty good against most things. Like, whale does a decent amount. Vengeance is cute. Vengeance is adorable there. We can just go ahead and discard this now. So the thing that stops the most damage here is whale. We're just gonna have to use it on the 2-2. It's kind of insane to use it anywhere else. Wait, is this not... Ooh, I had a mathematical error. I mean, it still had to be the play anyway. Like, I still would have done it, but I did think that was lethal. Oops. Wow, my brain is... Might be a little fried. It's getting kind of late into the day. I literally didn't even realize action was on me. I'm sorry. I'll console him and show him that I'm sorry for doing that by giving him the Shen emote. The most politest of emotes. So we are going to need to flip our Jinx here. It's going to come at the cost of making some pretty awkward moves though, huh? It's going to look a little weird. Banking maximum mana could actually matter. Whatever, I'll just do this. Here comes Ruination. The thing is, though, that hand was kind of so bad anyway, in terms of, like, what I can even do with it, that even just, like, getting the double draw off of Jinx might be better. Especially because, you know, we're looking for over the top right now. Is Neil already dead? We have to play around things. Like, I mean, he's dead if we assume he's not doing anything or playing anything, but we should assume he's doing and playing things. Assuming things is great when you do it right. And can be pretty catastrophic to your character if you don't. Alright. So, yes, I have to leave. These are my last couple of games, boys. We're a filthy, filthy Diamond 3 player. And it's going to be very funny because I'm leaving for 5 days. And when I'm going to come back, I'm still going to be Diamond. And there's going to be like 1,000 Masters. And you guys can all cybernetically bully me about being a Diamond 3 player over a week after an expansion. I mean, it'll be a fun meme for like 2 hours. And then I'll just get Masters. It's so easy to get Masters after the first week. It's like, just, you know, fire off a couple games. Kind of does itself, really. Once all like the sweaty tryhards die off. It's like day 1 is usually easy to climb because you queue into people trying fun new stuff, and then like day 2, novelties worn off a bit and you've climbed a bit, so you're queuing into sweaty tryhards, and then that starts to fall off like a lot, and then it gets easy again after, you know, there's just more people at higher ranks. Toronto Trinamere, so here, and you know, part of the reason I think understanding deck building, it matters, like even if you don't plan on deck building, is the same logic really applies to your mulligans as well, you know? It's like looking at cards as components of larger things, as well as just thinking about like having to go deeper for a specific key piece that you're looking for. It's just probability manipulation, right? And so like understanding everything I was talking about will really help your mulligans. You just have to think about what you want, really, you know? You have to want it. Yikes. Wow. I guess I always have to do this. It's not a good opening hand in this matchup. So we draw the Jinx. I probably have no choice but to play Fan here. And then draw Draven. And then the only question is, do I Draven before my attack? We don't have Vision. Would Bayou Brunch be good if it had an effect similar to Riptide, where if you have a Tahm Kench, it becomes fast speed? That would be kind of interesting. Would that even be similar to Riptide? The thing is, like, I don't think they really want any sort of, like, complex mechanics in this game. I think they want cards to be independently very simple. Like, they can't jam in a bunch of text. Like, if Tahm Kench is at the board, I'm a fast. Like, they want to avoid doing that as much as possible. So, the downside of playing Draven is people playing Avalanche. Okay, so how many Avalanches and how many Withering Whales per deck, actually? I mean, right now, I might actually run 3 and 3, honestly. As stupid as that is. Feels pretty bad. So we have to juggle, you know, the odds of getting kind of blown out by Avalanche here. I think I have no choice but to play into it. My clock is just not effective enough without it. Especially if we assume, like, odds of Whale. Can't really play around both. And we do have... You know, we're slowing down his strategy. We do have a bit of, like, a transition towards, like, a more board-independent finisher. The counter argument, it would be like, because we have crowd favorite, maybe it's too unbrickable. But the interesting thing is, like, oh, he just has a good hand. This is going to be rough. The interesting thing is, I actually might go for the Jinx early here and just be totally happy discarding the crowd favorite. I really wouldn't mind that in a game like this. Because it's a lot harder for his deck to deal with a Jinx than a board, right? Like, he might have to do something like Vengeance, and then if we draw another one, he might be screwed. So if I draw a 2 or less mana card, I could flip Jinx next turn. Well, that certainly will do it. We do get to go pretty aggressive here. I could open using my attack token down. This attack token is going to be kind of useless, honestly. We certainly don't have a pass since we're the one on the clock here. Yeah, I mean, we've probably lost this game. I don't think we really had the ability to beat a hand of Avalanche Vial there. Maybe Avalanche... Like, the biggest problem wasn't his hand. The biggest problem was ours. Depending on what side of the coin we're on, and depending on what our hand is, we certainly will play around Avalanche sometimes. But if it's a hand where, you know, if he has Avalanche, we're still not winning, or it's not great, then we really just can't do anything about it. Feels bad. I can't keep any sort of weird thing. I mean, we literally have to flip the Jinx here. So I guess I just get excited face and then rummage just to flip it. It feels so bad. So we're just hoping he doesn't have a way to remove Jinx. Which he might not. I mean, a flip Jinx can literally sometimes win the game on her own. Puts him on having to need a card, which is good. That's what we want. So the one awkwardness with hands like this is when you go to flip Jinx very early. Oh, that's very interesting draws. Weird. When you go to flip Jinx that early, what ends up happening is you'll find that you actually usually can't even... In most hands, we leveled her up like right at the tail end, but if you can't get the rocket like the turn after you flip her, then it ends up not really doing enough. Luckily, though, I mean, our augmented is kind of just good here. Augmented into rocket. I don't think there's any consideration to not do it exactly like that. And this is where the 1-mana rocket really comes in hot. I kind of wish I hadn't drawn the second augmented for no other reason than I'd like the ability to redraw it later. You know, but honestly, I think we're kind of fine. So it seems kind of weird, but I think we... Ooh. Awkward. I mean, we can't give that value. I think we have to assume we're actually just like killing it before our attack next turn. An argument could definitely be made that like taking like a little bit of damage, because we also like Teemo might apply puff caps. I don't know, that attack there was just so weak. Well, Vile's bad for me. Viling there pretty much means, well, it actually doesn't mean he has grasp. It just means he's hoping to draw grasp at least. So I do want to discard vision here. I mean, even like a Ruination would cuck me here, which is pretty sad because Ruination's not really supposed to cuck me here. Wah. Like I said, I mean, after that initial start, I think we can only really win if his hand is bad. So we're just kind of hoping it's an awkward hand. That's quite interesting, actually. Wow. He just goes for it here. You know, that's all of his mana. He might have misplayed that. I do think we were forced to play more cards there. The fact that he did that so early actually does give us a bit of a shot. We might have to jury rig here so that we can then just Zonite the vision. If we Zonite jury rig, I mean, we literally can't Zonite. Yeah, we have to do it like this. There's just no way around that. Yeah, so, I mean, his health is a little bit low there. Ha, Poro Cannon. The Poro Cannon draw would have been such a reward. I think we might have had to do it like this, but because Poro Cannon was on top of our deck, we actually would have gotten so rewarded. We would have gotten so rewarded if we had gone, like, Omega Greedy and did the Sump Dredger, or sorry, the Sump... or the Zonite Urchin earlier. So now we're losing to Hands of Atrocity, which kind of sucks. Nothing we can do about that whatsoever. Just open attack. The fact that he played Tryndamere here implies his option is Atrocity. Nothing we can do about that. Feels bad. Usually, any hand without Atrocity would have a better play there than Tryndamere. I guess we could have drawn like 3 puff caps. Yeah, he's good. GG, dude. You got me. You did it. You're nuts. So... oh, that's kind of funny. Weird. His hand must have been Omega Bricked if he plays Tryndamere there without Atrocity. Whew. Must have been really, really bad. Yeah, the interesting thing is... playing into Avalanche a little bit there. Basically, what I decided on, my logic is I'm more scared of Whale than Avalanche. And I don't think I can beat a hand that has both. And I mean, even if he Avalanched there, if he didn't have Vile Feast, it's still not that bad. Because even if he Avalanches there, you know, okay, so we open attack, we're dealing 4 damage plus Puff Cap. Puff Cap's worth approximately 1 point of damage, maybe a little bit more. So it's like, let's say we had 5.3 damage. If he Avalanches, and our Draven still hits for 3, and we get a Whirling Death too, which also can approximate to some amount of value. Yeah, we had to develop into the Avalanche. It's just kind of sucked that he also had the follow-up card. Lee Diana. So we've got Teemo, Draven's biggest fan. A couple of early plays, and we're attacking on turn 3 against Lee Diana. I don't mind playing Draven's biggest fan on 2. The sand actually looks pretty good. I don't think we can keep crowd favorites. I think you do need to just mulligan really aggressively in these matchups. There's Draven. And see, like, it's kind of funny, but drawing that Draven doesn't even feel that good. Because it kind of... it basically just turns our Draven's biggest fan into a 2-1. And I know that seems weird. You might say, well, Swim, drawing Draven is what biggest fan does anyway, so it's a 2-1 anyway. But here's the problem. Like, this deck especially, it's so important that our turn 1 and turn 2 are as optimal as possible, that, like, I don't want to have a blank in my card for multiple turns, you know? That's so important for this deck. I can't be blanking out like that. The draw did improve a little bit. The draw improved a shit ton. We're crazy players. Ooh, I snapped off that Draven a bit fast. Was it possible that it could have been House Spider into Rummage Vision? Like, when I see Draven there, I don't even think about it. I don't think it could have been. Nah, of course it's Draven there. Where the fuck am I trolling? I don't think it's really possible for him not to block, so we can do the kind of Teehee reactive Spinning Axe. If he palms, then that might change our Spinning Axe target. So now we get to reactively get 1 additional point of damage. Teemo's gonna go ahead and put 10 Puff Caps in. Puff Caps are worth a lot. He draws a shit ton. See, like, honestly, imagine if this Teemo was a second Draven. Like, how bad would that feel here? Really, you know? So just when you're deck building, think about ratioing and just like how often are you drawing something and how often do you want to be drawing something? That's it, right? So here's a Whirling Death, which, don't get me wrong, Whirling Death isn't useless in this deck, but it's not amazing. It's not really what this deck wants or needs, you know? It's all right. I mean, he certainly doesn't have anything here. I guess the best thing to do is to just go very wide. This is actually quite interesting. So there's a couple arguments. I could just go wide with like House Spider, Draven's biggest fan, and then next turn open myself up to Rummage. I think that's best. I could alternatively Rummage now, kicking Whirling Death and House Spider, or sorry, Whirling Death and biggest fan, and then if I find a sick like 1 mana card, it could make my play a little bit better. But honestly, all I want is just like a 6-unit board. So I think it's gotta be better to do this, really, right? And Whirling Death isn't terrible here. I don't even mind it. Whirling Death is kind of like... It has some is it good here? It has some application if your game plan is already working the way it wants to. Interesting. Like, as long as the rest of our game plan is working, Whirling Death can work. It's good in the mirror. That's where Whirling Death is probably best, I think. So, the only issue is he could have Nopeify. How much damage are we dealing? We're dealing a total of 7 damage here, plus the 15 Puff Caps. Oh, Teemo's leveling here. It's not quite enough. We give Nopeify. We basically have to try to kill the Lee Sin and hope it works. It's just like... Even if it's just... Here's the thing. Even if it's just Pale Cascade, we're still getting fucked by that. Isn't that crazy? How are we still getting fucked by that? A chance to basically win the game. The downside is fairly low. Rummaging here is only good if we're literally finding vision, right? I do have to go for it. It feels so bad. But it's the only thing... I could just wait and play it as a second Draven after combat, I guess. Wow, that's actually better. That's actually better. That's really funny. Because with this hand, we're narrow on resources and we don't have a big replenisher. So just getting like a bit more max value out of my tools while also, you know, giving me, you know, rummage fodder is pretty great. Alright guys, so I think I might be able to do one last game after this one, and then it's goodbye forever. There's an argument to avoid letting him challenge Raven, but honestly, Teemo's a much bigger threat for his challenger anyway. Teemo's a big fucking threat right now. He literally has to deal with Teemo or he's fucked. It's a solid top deck. We call that the nuts, I guess. Debatable. I I think I'd rather have burn damage, honestly. Like, augmented or get excited is better, because this plays into, like, will and hush. I don't know. I can't really complain about a 4-mana Wild Claw, though, can I? There's one mushroom.
I gotta work with this joker.
Whew. PBG and Swim quitting LOR Sag. It's funny memes. The only problem is I do think a lot of people are like... A lot of people kind of don't get the joke. In part because it's not really funny. So... A lot of people think that, like, you know, might think that me and BBG are actually quitting. I don't know what BBG's... I don't know. I mean... I heard him saying he was feeling bad about things. Did he clarify? Did he say he wasn't quitting and he was just tilted? Or is he out? Is he gone? I can't actually rummage the way the Flame Chompers until after I decide how this combat goes. What are the odds this House Spider ends up being essential to my game plan? It's gonna be really hard being detrimental. It can only really be detrimental if... Like, there's something else that... Like Chompers here, but Chompers I can already play out. Something that I couldn't manually play. Because I can't discard and play Chompers if I have that card there. Okay, this is more nutty. This feels good. BBZ is sad she can't play Demacia anymore. We're all a little sad right now. For sure. So now the thing is, you know, we have to think, are we developing into this or are we just open attacking? It looks like a pretty simple open attack. I don't think this development really adds anything to this. What we can do is we can go ahead and drag Lee Sin to the side. Dragging, you know, the Dragon Link to the very edge is kind of nice. The only problem with that, though, is that Lee Sin will absorb more damage by blocking the crowd favorite with Overwhelm. So now, the Dragon Link being a blocker, what we need to do is make sure that Dragon Link wants to block as far to the right as possible. So it's like crowd favorite on the left side. It doesn't get to strike against Draven's quick attack, so, you know, we can do Draven here. And then, basically this is kind of the best way to sequence it. This looks good. So, if it wants to lifesteal in the early here, it has to do that. We've got Hush. Yeah, Hush is all right there. So what we can do is we can go ahead and just start nutting with our disgusting hands, I guess. I guess we're manually playing Vision? Yeah, we manually play Vision. Ooh, that's awkward, but the Draven's giving us another axe. So I guess I guess we're axing the Vision then, because the Draven's giving us another axe to discard. Only if the Draven strikes. If he now, like, palms the Draven, then oddly enough, that kind of fucks us. Because we need to sequence around exactly how many axes we're going to have. I do like discard aggro. It's cool that... I mean, the meta is oppressive right now. I do think some of the best decks are pretty interesting. I think discard aggro, as opposed to other forms of aggro, I think it's actually really interesting to play. There's, I think, a surprising amount of angles to it. Okay, so, I mean, we have pretty great options here. He'd need something pretty nuts to stop this. Like, I mean, he should survive this, get excited with, like, a deny or a, you know, whatchamacallit, the other thing. But he shouldn't be able to stop the Jinx after that.
You should try blinking sometime.
Okay. Nightfall is garbage. Nightfall's kind of the same way, where it's like, it's interesting. Unfortunately, Nightfall's complete trash. I'm exaggerating a bit. I'm exaggerating a small amount. It's not great. Okay. So he's got the deny. If we draw, like, units here, this could actually be pretty awkward, because we do kind of need the rocket to come in. And he does have... Wait, I guess we lost. Oh, well. How did this happen? Why did I feel like we were winning this game? Wah.
They forced us to choose death or the blade. What is gained when you become malevolent?
It's an alright draw. If he's killing me this turn, he might not be able to save enough mana for Nopify. To play around Guiding Touch, I mean, we can't let it go to combat. We pretty much just have to kind of like play or get excited right now. There's nothing weird and fancy that can be done, I think. Is there a weird universe in which a better play could possibly be letting Jinx die and then playing the other Jinx into the crowd favorite? And then next turn we might be able to get... I mean, we can get Missile next... No, but... Nah, it's definitely not right. Yeah, there's nothing weird to do here. Just hit this in face and hope he doesn't have anything. That's good for me. That's also good for me. I mean, every point of damage matters so much as aggro. Yeah, Teemo's just a good card. The weakest thing about Teemo is double drawing Teemo. And having to deal with the fact that it's a literal fucking mushroom that does nothing. But Teemo's a great card. Like, it's a super solid one-drop. And this isn't news either. It's like Teemo is a competitive card. It's been running competitive decks before. I think it's just like a lot of Runeterra newcomers that just might not know that history. So if I do this, and if he nopifies me, I am getting the rocket, but he's healing for 4 in a way I can't stop, which means we still have to top deck lethal, and our Jinx is dead, so we really have to top deck lethal. Alright, so this is kind of bad. He does have a bunch of mushrooms left in his deck still, 13. That could just win us the game, actually. You know what? We actually have an open attack here. Wait, we're totally fine. He has a 1-card hands, and we have an open attack. We're totally fine. What am I talking about? We're free. What an easy game. We're good, boys. Sorry, I got, you know, little Lee Sin trauma there. Ooh. Ooh. Yikes. Well, we're losing to Palm. Oh, fuck. Oh, please! Please! Cap me! Do it! You have 13! Oh, no. Oh, no, 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 no. Not like this. So I need him to have Palm and not Guiding Touch. I need him to have to draw another card. If he Guiding Touches, then he needs to draw 2 more Puff Caps. Oh, we're good. Oh, the Puff Cap got us there. Holy shit, we're good. Oh my god, we did it. Woo. But yeah, it's a pretty solid deck. This card is also super interesting to build. I think, like, what's happening right now is a lot of people are net decking this version of discard. And, you know, in the past, it used to be, like, there was big arguments, like, do you top-end burn? Like, I think the Swarm package kind of has to be a given now that Pora Cannon is in the game, but I think just because it's not as new of a concept, a lot of people are just falling into the same pattern. I'm seeing people basically net deck, like, exactly one deck. And there's fairly few things you can do. I'm thinking, you know, it really just depends on what kind of tables I want. I'm thinking about cutting the 3rd crowd favorite. I'm thinking about running a 3rd rummage. Minor tweaks. I definitely don't miss the 3rd Draven. I really don't at all. Like, part of me, and this I think would be going too far, but I could almost cut the 2nd Draven for a 2nd Teemo and run 3 Biggest Fan and 1 Draven. Like, that's going too far, I'm pretty sure, but it's not even out of the question. It really isn't. It really, really isn't. You only need to draw 1 Draven. And so, like, using a champ slot on him, especially in, like, drawing him early, isn't necessarily great. But Draven's nice in the mirror. Landmark can snag you games. All right, so we've got, yeah, we've got the Landmark. What's it called? University. So Landmark does have the ability to win you some games. I think the biggest issue with it is that it's, like, just absolute garbage as a card. Unadulterated trash. Pure trash card. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. But yeah, a lot of fun. That was my last game, guys. that was my last game. If it ended a bit sooner, I might have been able to play one more, but that's it, guys. It's time for my break. I'm gonna have a lot of fun. I'm gonna miss you guys, but I think it's gonna strengthen our relationship. Because I'm not gonna lie, we spent a little too much time together. I'm thinking like clean break might be better. Might be better for both of us. Might be better for both of us, guys. Because, you know, I don't want to be codependent. I don't want to be one, you know, where it's just like we're always going out together and it's every single day, joined at the hip. So I do think this will make our relationship even stronger than it was before. Even stronger than it was before, okay? When I return on Thursday. I can't promise super consistent streams because I do plan on working on a lot of other things. But I will be back, and what I can promise is my streams will be higher quality. Like they have been, like tonight, the last few hours have been pretty great. Whereas relatively, a lot of my other streams have kind of sucked. All right, guys. This is it. The big one. I'm looking forward to coming back. I really am. I'll see you guys then. You can, if you want, like I said, I'm going to be tweeting random pictures of fucking hiking and mountain. I'm not going to use my phone for any communication. And I'm not going to I'm not even going to give you updates. I'm just going to give you pictures and no text. But if you want to kind of like follow me on that little journey, you can keep tabs on that. But that's it. Other than that, you will see none of me for almost a week. I'll see you guys next time, boys. Have a good night.